Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
William looked at a makeshift counter made of a wooden crate. It was the kind of thing that brought fruit, bread, milk, and groceries to the stores. In general, the man could not believe his eyes. But covered with colorful counter customers among the old teddy dogs and bears lay him. A rabbit. Not just any rabbit, but a rabbit. Kelly couldn't think of another name for him. Well, and Alice then called her favorite toy the same rabbit, sometimes adding funny words. Mr. Kelly the Rabbit. Almost 3 centuries ago, brought with godparents from a business trip to Holland. Then in my homeland, in the stores of such wonderful toys were not. And now with the modern abundance of rabbits, still somehow stood out among the mass of his plush tribesmen. Smooth fur, delicate peach color, long ears, sticking out smart black eyes. This rabbit was dressed in jeans, a white and red striped shirt. A straw hat sat firmly on his head. Slightly shifted, it was an original and very unusual toy. It was impossible to be mistaken here. It is unlikely that in this small provincial town suddenly appeared exactly the same plush animal. He had too interesting a history. The Dutchman was a foreigner after all, brought into the country many years ago. Kelly said that when she first saw the rabbit, she almost choked with joy. Godfather smilingly handed the girl a gift, not even realizing what an impression the toy made on Kelly. She hadn't parted with Mr. Rabbit the girl since then. She was no longer so small, almost 11 years old. Peers slowly threw away dolls and turned their eyes to outfits, cosmetics, some handbags. And Kelly ran home from school, and the first thing she did was to snuggle up to Mr. Rabbit. Lesh's friend sat on her desk. When the girl did her homework, he would go on long journeys with her. And certainly Kelly would take the rabbit to bed with her favorite toy at her side. So sweetly crumbled. Then the girl grew up, fell in love, got married. She and William met at a club. It was banal, but at the same time very romantic. They met for a short time, and almost immediately they both realized that they were made for each other. And as time later showed, they were not mistaken. Married, and after the wedding moved into William's apartment, which he inherited from his grandmother. We were so lucky, we got our own corner right away, and it was just wonderful. The rabbit, of course, moved into the apartment of the newlyweds and took in it an honorable place, top shelves, racks, and in the living room. William also liked this plush animal. Cute, so stylish, groovy. A couple of years after the wedding, William and Kelly became parents. The family had a daughter, Alice, a wonderful, golden, cheerful girl like the babies from an advertisement or from a postcard. Chubby cheeks, pink lips, huge blue eyes framed by thick lashes. Dolls, yes, and only parents do not dote in the daughter. The girl grew, developed. Pleased mom and dad with successes and new moments. In time sat down and time went. There were no problems with her. That's what they call a gift child. When the little girl grew to toys, Mr. Rabbit inherited her. And girl, she immediately appointed the elegant beast as her best friend. Just like her mother, once Alice dragged him with her literally everywhere, and on the street took him out of the garden, and on a trip without him did not go. And William involuntarily smiled, remembering how once the 3 of them flew to the sea, suddenly packed literally in one evening. It was just a hot ticket. Both spouses had just had a vacation, a fortunate coincidence. How happy were they then? And they understood it perfectly well, consciously enjoyed the pleasant moments. Wandered around the deserted, along the shore, ankle deep in water, holding hands. Kelly, William, Alice, and of course, the rabbit. How old was the daughter then? Probably about 8. She had just finished 1st grade. Alice had a very funny smile at the time. You sweet, sweet, Mr. Rabbit was lost. Probably the girl forgot it on the beach or on the embankment, where she played with the local kids. In general, Alice has always been responsible and attentive. But there is a flight, a lot of new impressions. Acclimatization is tired, probably caught up already at the hotel. Alice had to go to bed, but the rabbit in the room was not. How then was the girl frightened? She cried, begged her parents right now to go in search of a friend. Never Alice was so capricious, never been so demanding. William and Kelly realized that these were not just childish tantrums. Then they had barely managed to talk their girl into waiting until morning. "But where are we going now?" exhorted the distraught Kelly, who also looked sad. After all, Mr. Rabbit meant a lot to her. "It's dark. We're tired. Tomorrow morning we'll go to the quay and look for him." "What if someone's picked him up by then?" "It'll be all right," William promised. "I'll see if it's a beautiful, unusual toy. Someone could really just take it away. And what about then? They'd never find another stuffed animal like that." In the morning they went to the beach. They looked everywhere on the embankment and where they had been swimming yesterday. On the beach, it was as if the rabbit had disappeared into the water. Or maybe it was washed out to sea by a wave, or someone threw the toy into the waves for nothing. Kelly and William had given up hope. But Alice did not give up. She searched the neighborhood and looking under every shop, inspecting the bushes, asking passers, "Are the same question if any of them have not seen a lonely plush rabbit?" Kelly and William. Sadly, they were both at a loss. How to tell their daughter it was all useless. But then a miracle happened. There's no other word for it. The family had breakfast at a cafe overlooking the sea. William barely managed to persuade his daughter to stop looking for something to eat. She went to the cafe, only when her parents promised her that afterwards they would go back to the beach again and keep looking for Mr. Rabbit. She had to agree. William was making plans. He should probably tell Alice that Mr. Rabbit had gone on a sea voyage and suggest that she visit the local toy store. Maybe she picked something she liked. He's distracted. He was already stressed by this fruitless search. He wanted to swim in the sea, visit local attractions. Did you have to search the neighborhood for Mr. Rabbit? It was unlikely, of course, that the offer to buy a new toy would make Alice so happy. William knew perfectly well how much his daughter loved that rabbit, but something had to be done. Alice once again asked the people she met if they had seen her toy. And suddenly a woman who was leading two kids in white costumes by the hand answered in the affirmative. "And so this is your missing one." Radiantly, she smiled at Alice. "Have you seen my rabbit?" Woke up the girl, but not the rabbit and its photo, where the woman smiled and looked at Alice's parents. "Go over there. There's a lamppost around the corner. There's a very interesting ad on it." Alice, ahead of the adults, rushed to that very post. When Kelly and William arrived, the girl was already reading the notice. It was printed on a black and white printer. A picture of Mr. Rabbit took up most of the sheet. It was definitely him. Except for some reason his hat was adorned with paper flowers. Those details hadn't been there before. The text was, of course, speculative. "I got lost on the seafront when I went out alone to admire the sea. Such a rash act. I should have lost sight of my little mistress. Now I miss her. I miss her very much, and I'm waiting for them to find me and take me away. I'm staying with a nice man for now. Here's his phone number. Contact him. I'm very, very much looking forward to it." Sure enough, William immediately called back the number given. A voice that appeared to belong to an elderly man answered him. They arranged to meet right away on the boat, on the dock. This man worked there, coordinating flights, taking fares. "Hello, it's warm." The tanned old man smiled at them. And then he turned to Alice alone. "So this is your rabbit." "My," fervently assured the girl. "I can see in your eyes that you are telling the truth, but there was a red-haired girl before you." She claimed that the toy of her up to the floor with her feet demanded to return her beast. "And you gave it back." Alice gasped. Her lips trembled immediately, a sure sign of sustained tears. William's heart squeezed with acute pity for her daughter. How could he help her? No. The old man shook his head. "I asked her one question right away, and the girl couldn't answer it. And if the rabbit was hers, it wouldn't have been hard for her. Now I'll ask you one." Alice exhaled with relief and looked carefully at the older man. He just like that radiated calmness and infected those around him. There are such people stretched navy sweatshirt and without a visor dashingly shifted on the bull. In general, they made him some kind of almost fairy tale character. "You well looked at the photo on the ad," clarified the old man. "Yes," nodded the girl. "Then answer me, what has changed? What is wrong with your toy?" Maybe something has been added or, conversely, disappeared. Well, answer the flowers on the hats, smiled the girl. They were not there before, right? The old man shone. I twisted them specially from paper and pinned them to the hat. To test such a thing, there are a lot of people who want to get such a beautiful toy. I need to know for sure. Boat Ka went to his booth and soon returned with Mr. Rabbit in his hands. Alice immediately clutched the toy tightly to her. William did not hesitate. Never again would his daughter lose her plush friend. After all she had been through. William talked to the old man for a while afterward, offering him money for the find, but of course he wouldn't take it. The archer told him that he had a granddaughter. Now she is almost an adult, but before that she used to come to her grandfather's house for vacations. Sea, sun, lots of friends, magnificent nature. What else does a child need for happiness? The old man is a girl on a boat. They went to the beach, climbed mountains, went to the city, to the amusement park and water park. It was a fun time. But then my Alice grew up, went to university. She had her own business, her own worries for young people, in a word. Now she doesn't visit much. I miss her, of course. When Alice was little, she used to carry a toy with her everywhere. But not a stuffed animal, but a doll. I just imagined what would have happened to my granddaughter if that doll had gotten lost back then. The old man grinned. A tragedy of universal scale, no less. And then I see a rabbit on the bench, forgotten and lying. And it's dark, it's late. You can see it's a favorite toy. You can see it right away. Obviously, the child is very upset. So he took it to his box. I don't know what will happen to him at night. There are young people walking around and stray dogs running around. It's safer in my place, under my supervision. And in the morning, next to the place where he found the ad, I pasted the same one. And also on the embankment walked somewhere where such leaves hung. It worked. Here you go. Thank you very much. William shook the old man's hand firmly. That rabbit really means a lot to our daughter. Just one more question. How did you know the owner of the toy was a girl? That's what you said in the ad. Lost her little mistress. It's not a doll. It's simple. Boys play different games. Their toys tend to be a little more scruffy and tattered. I saw a flower on the rabbit's shirt. Somebody made it with their own inexperienced hands. Well, of course, only a girl could do that. It's not like a boy would embroider a cross-stitch. Did I do it? Kelly smiled. Many years ago, our daughter inherited the toy. Did I get it right away? He's a complicated rabbit with a history. Of course, Alice never left her stuffed animal anywhere else. The girl even carried it to school in her backpack as a kind of talisman. And already not a little then was almost 12 years old. And yet the rabbit was in her satchel. The fateful day Alice didn't come home. Interested in something, William was approached by a boy who was selling toys on a makeshift counter. A skinny, tanned teenager about 13, 14 years old. Rustic, he seemed to be dressed very plainly, if not poorly. Shorts, stretchy line, scarlet t-shirt, flip-flops. Yeah, and the accent is a little unusual. It's a beautiful toy. William pointed his eyes at Mr. Rabbit. The longer the man looked at the stuffed animal, the clearer he realized that he was Mr. Rabbit. It would still be possible to assume that the toy is just a copy of the very same plush friend on the flower that Kelly came out years ago on his shirt. There it was. William has now gotten a very clear look at it, and it's just amazing. It's the thread that could lead to Alice. 5 years of searching had left the man desperate to find his daughter. And now this. It's a beautiful toy, the teenager agreed. Whose is it? My sister's sister grew up, and now we're selling her possessions. William had a whole 1 million more questions. His heart was pounding, dark spots flashed in his eyes, but you have to look calm and poised. The guy must not realize what impression the toy had made on William. This will cause unnecessary suspicion. Might frighten the boy and then possibly cut short. It's as thin as a spider's web. Can I buy this rabbit? William clarified. For my daughter, she'd love it. Yes, of course. The young salesman shrugged his shoulders and set a high price, I must say. But William wasn't even going to haggle. And now Mr. Rabbit was back in his hands. I can't believe it. Too bad the toy can't talk. I'd like to ask Mr. Rabbit about Alice. Where did she go 5 years ago? What's wrong with her now? Though that last question would be a scary one to ask. There's no telling what might have happened to her daughter. Uncertainty is, of course, hard and scary, but nothing is known yet. What is known is that hope lives on. Hope that the girl is all right, that she will be found someday, right? William took the toy and walked towards the exit of the market. There was no way the boy would suspect anything, but William wouldn't leave. Of course, he won't go anywhere now. He'll take a secluded place and watch the boy from there. Someday the boy will go home, and William will follow him like a shadow. He needs to find out where this teenager lives. That's where Alice might be. The boy said the rabbit belonged to his sister. Maybe it is Alice. Mr. Rabbit was her toy. Call the police. The thought visited William several times during the waiting process. But the man never made the call. Too soon, too soon. There was nothing they could do to help him now. How many times had this happened in 5 years? Especially at first, it was a passerby who was relentlessly questioned with no clothes on. The father would suddenly say he'd seen a similar girl here and there. William called the police, demanded they follow up on the lead. They did, but it always turned out to be some other kid, a familiar face in a stranger's car. So William calls the police again. They set up a cordon, checked the cars, and again in vain. And so many times. As time went on, the police became less and less responsive to such signals. And then the search turned into something sluggish, formal, for the sake of a tick. It was unbearable. Of course, now they'd tell him the toy was wrong. They just don't seem to know Mr. Rabbit's history. They don't realize that William can't be wrong. No, better to check it out for himself and then go to the police with more reliable and complete information. William sat down on the bench for a cool bun. Great vantage point. There's that kid right there, right in the palm of his hand. The man just happened to be in this small country town. Actually, the nuts had to go on company business to his colleague, but he suddenly fell ill. Here and sent William with work matters. The man sorted out unexpectedly, quickly, and without problems. There was still enough time left before departure. That's why William decided to take a walk in a foreign city. In the past, he always liked to wander around new places to get acquainted with the local color. After his daughter's disappearance, the feeling had dulled. Has it faded? Not surprisingly. And yet William felt the urge to go for a walk on a sunny September day. The streets are quite deserted. It's typical of such small towns. It's probably more crowded in the evenings and weekends. And now there are elderly people on benches, young moms with strollers. That's the whole population. Who's at work, who's at school. And the city is quiet like this. William walked through the streets and wondered. It felt as if his time machine had transported everything back a couple of decades. As if from the past, old houses, dusty sidewalks with grass, overgrown squares. And here it would be really back 10 years. They were so happy then, so inexpressibly happy, the three of them, he, Kelly, Alice. It seemed that it would always be like that and even better, but the fates, as usual, had their own plans for everything, including their family. After that memorable trip to the sea, in which Mr. Rabbit was lost and then miraculously found, Kelly became ill, a common, seemingly common cold, but it lingered for far too long. Symptoms in the form of weakness, dizziness, and poverty did not leave the young woman. She didn't even want to go to the doctors at first. Don't be ridiculous. Kelly fought off her husband, who insisted she go to the hospital. I don't have a high fever. Well, I'm not strong enough. Well, the headache, it will go away for a little while. That's the kind of thing doctors don't worry about. It didn't. Energetic young woman who had time to do a lot of things during the day, and then in the evening and go for a walk. The whole family was suddenly pulled completely and cheerful. In the morning, she could hardly get out of bed to go to work. Back Kelly now returned exclusively by cab, although before she loved to walk and always walked home. Household chores, daughter household. All this was now on William. He didn't complain. It was not difficult for him to prepare dinner and check Alice's homework. But he was frightened by Kelly's condition, who still insisted that she was doing well and that she would soon be better. One day, the man could not stand it and almost forcefully pushed his straight spouse into the car and drove her to the best center in the city. Not free, of course, but the doctors from there could definitely be trusted. The diagnosis sounded like a thunderclap, some rare blood disease, genetic dormant for the time being, and then suddenly woke up and activated treatment. Practically none, only experimental and very expensive. Prognosis. The prognosis is very unfavorable. For the young spouses, it became a huge ordeal. Both felt confused and frightened. Kelly cried and talked incessantly about wanting to see her daughter grow up. William's heart was tearing with pity for his wife and himself, too. How would he be without her, if anything? The man had never felt for anyone like he felt for Kelly. They were like two halves of the same whole. William had never known such a thing was possible. He thought love stories were the stuff of poets. Then he met Kelly and realized he was wrong. They were happy, so happy together. A model family. They were invited, held up as role models. And then this. Alice, of course, they didn't tell us all the details. They only said that Mom was ill. She needed rest, peace, positive emotions. And the treatment, of course, it was necessary to explain to the girl why her mother now so often goes to the hospital, drinks pills by the handful, and goes to the center as to work. At first, the experimental treatment seemed to work. Kelly felt better. Her tests were almost normal. William was relieved at the time. He thought it was over. They'd won. The man breathed a sigh of relief. The family was slowly getting back on track. Yes, Kelly now had to have her blood counts monitored and take medication. Oh, it was nothing. It was nothing compared to what could have happened. Happiness lasted about 6 months. And then the disease took its toll on the young woman with redoubled vigor. Kelly's body was no longer responding to therapy. She was fading right before her eyes. William often remembered his wife as she had been in her last months. Pale, thin, with bruises all over her body. It was unbearable to see your loved one ill and to be unable to help them. William met with doctors, searched for centers that would take such cases, consulted with professors, and everywhere the answer was the same. Nothing can be done. It's a disease. The man invented this flea market only because it reminded him very much of the spontaneous market near his grandmother's house, where he and Kelly lived for the first years of their marriage. There were none of those in their town now. But here in this place, it was like a mini market from the past, where people sold all sorts of things from their pockets. Kelly liked to look at old things at the flea market near her house, and she walked through it like a museum, admiring the leather-bound books, the old-fashioned floor lamp, and the clothing from around the middle of the last century. I mean, this is history. History incarnate, she said to her husband, who didn't particularly share her spouse's interest, but dutifully wandered along with her through the long rows. Surely Kelly wouldn't have missed this hoarder by now. Nor did William pass it by. Decided to take a walk, see what people were selling. I came across this teenager. At first I couldn't believe it when I saw Mr. Rabbit on the counter. But now he's got the toy in his hands, living proof that he wasn't dreaming. Miracles indeed. The sun attracted a September breeze, nice and fresh, and chased the mouse away. Sitting on the bench was even pleasant. William kept his eyes on the boy who sat in the lotus posture in front of his counter and offered goods to passersby. Only nobody bought anything from him. Of course, who needs old stuffed animals? The only thing that could still attract anyone, Mr. Rabbit, was now in the hands of William. This one really hoped that not too long ago this toy had been held by his daughter. Perhaps the rabbit still held the warmth of her hands. He wanted to believe that. William had last seen his daughter exactly 5 years ago. It was also a September morning. The girl was going to school. The weather was about the same sunny, clear, pleasant. Man was having a hasty breakfast. He was already late for work. Alice was up before everyone else as usual. Since Kelly was gone, she hadn't slept well at all. It had been almost 3 years by then, but the problems hadn't gone away. Although William regularly showed the girl to the neurologist and dutifully fed her all the prescribed medications, Alice sat at the table and melancholically embroidered with a teaspoon sugar in a glass of tea. In front of her on a plate lay a sandwich with sausage, cheese, and herbs. It had been made for the girl by Jenna. She had left home very early today. She had to have another test at the women's clinic, and they take blood early. So she left, out of the blue. Soon their family will have a baby boy. The boy William will become a father for the second time, and Alice will become a big sister. She had longed so much for a brother or sister. A few years ago, she had asked for a baby boy from Mom and Dad, and they promised that it would still be there, but later. And so Alice's wish was about to come true. Just brother and parents, Mom, stepmom, and Alice. Now she already and obviously does not want to become an older sister. Except that no one was interested in her opinion on this matter. Jenna, she's very good, kind, sensitive. She tries to become Alice, if not a mother, at least a good friend. She watches special videos, how to weave beautiful braids, buying up for her adopted daughter beautiful nooks, toys, clothes. Only Alice is indifferent to all this. She's changed a lot since not being Kelly, but that's not surprising. All three of them were so close. A real team, they understood each other without words. Laughing a lot, always coming up with something interesting. And then tragedy struck. Her mother was Alice's favorite and dearest person. With Kelly gone, the girl's whole world turned upside down. William knew it would be hard. He himself could hardly bear the grief that had fallen on her. But Alice withdrew into herself. She stopped eating, stopped drinking. There was no talk of going to school for a long time. The girl as if frozen in a cocoon, and no way to get through to her. Gradually, with the help of doctors, William managed to at least a little disintegrate. Daughter Alice at least stopped refusing food. But she remained indifferent and cold. It was as if something in her was torn. The cheerful girl had changed. William hoped not irrevocably. Her father tried to please her on a trip the two of them went, and often went somewhere cafes, entertainment, children's centers, stores. Nothing helped. Everything that had delighted my daughter before now left her completely indifferent. It was hard, and it was scary. The only thing that remained unchanged was Alice's attachment to Mr. Rabbit. The girl seemed to grow to love and appreciate the toy even more. Her daughter grew older, and Mr. Rabbit traveled in her school bag, accompanying her mistress everywhere. William did not think during that difficult period that another woman would appear in his life, and certainly not that it would happen so soon. But it happened all the same. Friends, seeing that their buddies are in a depressed state, one day dragged him literally forcefully out of the house. They were sitting in a bar, drinking, laughing, discussing something insignificant, just like in the old days. And William really relaxed, took a little break from his thoughts and his problems. And then the company was joined by the ladies' wives of these friends. One of them came with her friend Jenna. As it later turned out, it was a planned event. The friends decided to introduce William to someone so that he would not go completely mad, struggling in his thoughts and anxieties. They rightly believed that Alice would also benefit from a woman's attention and care. Jenna, she was aware of William's situation and was ready to dive into it all. Should feelings for the man arise? Of course, Jenna herself had a difficult fate, a failed marriage under her belt, the husband much older and wealthier than Jenna herself. He behaved towards her like a possessive man. During the years of marriage, the woman completely lost her self-esteem, but acquired a lot of complexes. She couldn't leave her husband. Somehow he suppressed her will, subjugated himself, made her believe that she accepts him. No one needs her. So worthless and wretched. Jenna fulfilled all the desires and demands of her husband, except one. She could not give him an heir. Examined on this occasion, found health problems. Jenna was told that with such features of the body, she will never be able to get pregnant. For a woman, it became a tragedy. After all, from childhood, she dreamed of being a mother of many children. The husband demanded a divorce. He called Jenna the last words, accused her of infertility, as if she could do something about it. And so Jenna was left alone. Over time, the woman realized that this divorce was a huge blessing for her. Now she didn't understand how she'd ever lived with such a man. For a while, Jenna did not think about a new relationship. Healed wounds came to her senses, and then Then she wanted to meet her mankind. Understanding sensitive such a person who would agree to a marriage without children. It's a difficult task. I can't tell you that. Her friends told her about William and Jenna, and suddenly she wanted to meet him, especially a man who's raising a daughter on his own. He already had a child, and the possibility of having more children would hardly be a problem for such a man. She liked William at first sight. Handsome, pleasant to talk to. Sensitive, kind. Not at all like Jenna's old husband. A man like that is very easy and warm to be around. And then he needs so much support and care right now. And so does his little girl. And Jenna has so much unspent love and tenderness. And so it began. They began to meet, then suddenly for themselves realized that they no longer want to part. William's feelings for Jenna. It wasn't like Kelly, from the first wife. The man was dizzy, goosebumps, passion, tenderness, vivid emotions. Jenna she attracted with her reliability, warmth, gentleness. With her William felt a calmness that he had not felt for a long time. Jenna was like a quiet home harbor, a shelter, a rear. It attracted, did not let go. It was not without its difficulties, of course. How to tell Olsa that there would be another woman in their house so soon? How to build a relationship between stepmother and stepdaughter? William assumed that the daughter would be against it. But Alice accepted the change, as she had for the last couple of years, with complete indifference. Jenna tried very hard to make friends with the girl, tried to talk to her, to anticipate her every wish. She was always thinking up interesting trips. All past Alice, and occasionally could still talk to her father. But her stepmother just didn't notice her girl. Jenna was very upset by this. It was the first time she had seen such an indifferent child. The woman understood that Alice was very traumatized by the loss of her mother. But this is not normal. This behavior, we have to do something. Children's psychologists spread their hands, saying that the girl needs time, love, attention, sympathy, respect. All this will definitely bear fruit. And then something happened that no one expected. Jenna realized that she was expecting a child. The doctors had convinced her that such an outcome was impossible. And yet the miracle happened. Jenna had never felt so happy. She was going to be a mom after all. Perhaps the arrival of a baby will melt the ice in Alice's heart. Little babies are like a ray of light. William didn't know how to react to the news. He seemed to be happy, but he was also anxious, mostly because of Alice. Unlike Jenna, the man realized that it was unlikely that his daughter would be happy about the new member of the family, especially since everything was happening so quickly. Alice Ann longed, as if in an icy shell for whom she longs for her mother misses her old life. And then everything changes so fast. First Kelly's gone, then Jenna shows up. Now there's a baby on the way. Alice has slipped in her grades, used to bring home only A's and occasional B's. Now her diary was filled with 2s and 3s. Teachers at first felt sorry for the girl, glad that she at least returned to class. Well, not to pull her grades until graduation from school. And Alice also lost all her friends. How to be friends with a man who refuses to go out and does not answer the phone. So the girl was left alone, which it seems, did not regret. This new Alice. Closed indifferent, frightening and disturbing. William loved his daughter very much. She was the meaning of his life. He was angry at himself, at the doctors, at the circumstances. Angry because he was powerless to change anything. To bring joy back to his daughter's life, to help her. William, blame yourself. Maybe you should have waited to get married. You see, he couldn't bear the hardships of life alone. He wanted warmth, love, and acceptance. Suddenly, the arrival of Jenna, and now the baby, had traumatized Alice further. She's good. Jenna is warm, so sincere, easy, and pleasant to be with. Except that Alice, when she found out that there would soon be a baby in the family, Jenna looked at her father with such eyes, as if he had betrayed her. Then William more than once remembered that full of pain and despair. The look in his daughter's eyes, Alice dreamed of him in terrible dreams. The man would jump up and could not sleep for a long time. Of course, in what happened to Alice, William blamed himself, did not save what he had done wrong. That's how worthless a father he turned out to be. Kelly wouldn't have let that happen. Everything was kind of normal that morning. Nothing alerted William. Alice put Mr. Rabbit in her backpack. From the hour end of the ponytail, she pulled up her white loafers. It was still quite warm. Alice then stepped out of the house in a white short-sleeved blouse with lanterns, a bouffant skirt like a princess in a dark blue color, and polish in their boat shoes, all lovingly picked out by Jenna. She tried very hard to find clothes in which Alice would look like a doll. And she succeeded, it must be said, only the student herself. The outfits did not please her too much. William remembered very well what Alice had left in that morning, because in the evening he described in detail his daughter's costume to the policemen who were writing the report. Alice didn't come back from school. She just didn't come back and didn't show up the next day. And another day later, also the girl was missing. Since then, William did not see her again and knew nothing about her fate. Jenna was already on maternity leave, so she did not go to work. She met Alice from school and a delicious lunch, specially cooked different dishes for the girl to finally understand what she liked the most. It was Jenna who called William when the girl did not return from school at the usual time. Her voice sounded worried, but William wasn't worried then, so Alice was half an hour late. Maybe she'd finally gone out with her girlfriends, or just hanging out at the store. Although, of course, it was nothing like the Alice of today. That's how the old daughter would have behaved. Fun, curious, and cheerful. An hour passed. Jenna dialed William again. This time she sounded panicked. The woman managed to call all Alice's teacher, parents of her classmates. All in one voice assured that the girl left the gymnasium on time. Many saw her leaving the schoolyard, and then Alice's traces were lost. Here already, and William got worried now to send off the boss, and I will come. He threw to his wife. All right, come on, hurry up, I'm so scared. I'll go to the yards myself, look for her. I don't know if she's playing around. Maybe it's somewhere. It just doesn't look like Alice. William was in agreement with his wife. Alice was playing around. No, it can't be fear. An icy hand was already beginning to squeeze his father's heart. By some special instinct, he felt that something had happened, something very bad. Alice was not at home. William had hoped so. The girl's phone, of course, was not answered. Together with the couple, William's neighbors scoured the neighborhood looking for their daughter. The sun was beginning to slip toward the horizon, coloring the sky, fantastic red and pink colors. That's when the man realized it was time to go to the police. Doing so was scary, as if to admit definitively and irrevocably that something terrible and irreparable had happened. But there was no escape. William's statement was not taken seriously at first. A girl almost 12 years old walking around somewhere. Teenagers, that's what they are. Every day parents contact us, and then they find a missing person and get it in the neck from their loving relatives. Yeah, kids do get gray hairs. I can't tell you that. Alice is different. She has no friends now. She doesn't like to go out. She's withdrawn, not sociable. Is she sick? The man in the uniform became suspicious. William felt like punching him in the face for suggesting such a thing. I held back, of course. All the more reason not to be so far from the truth. Of course, Alice is not entirely healthy. Her state of mind is troubling, but it's temporary. It's a bereavement. She'll get better, just as long as she finds her daughter. The application's been accepted. The search has begun. The authorities were joined by volunteer teams. The city and its environs were calmed up and down. Posters were put up. Passers-by were questioned. Forest parks and local bodies of water were checked. William himself wandered the streets and climbed into attics, searched basements, peeked over fences in the private sector. Well, he couldn't sit still and wait for the weather to clear while it was unknown what was happening to his daughter. Not knowing. That was the worst part. All kinds of thoughts went through the man's head. It was hard, very hard. William couldn't get his head around it. Jenna also looked lost and frightened. She wandered around the rooms, but she couldn't sit still for a minute. Both of them had not slept for several days, while they were actively searching for results. These searches kept failing. At one time, the police even suspected the parents of the girl, say William or Jenna, did something to Alice, and specifically asked for help so that no one thought of them. But the alibis of both spouses were ironclad. Soon they were cleared of all suspicion. Only Alice was never found. So that didn't make it any easier. Because of the worry, Jenna went into labor prematurely. Tim was born very small and weak. He spent a few days in the neonatal intensive care unit. William. The event that should have been such a joyous occasion left him completely indifferent, scary to say the least. But he did not even worry about the fate of his son while the baby was fighting for his tiny life in the intensive care unit. A child William had not yet known, had not yet had time to love. Without her, the man felt as if half of his heart had been ripped out of his chest. Then, of course, William accepted his son and loved him with all his soul. Looking at this tiny, touching creature of a man, I don't know how I could ever have been so indifferent to him. Now he's a little light in the window for both parents. Funny, so kind, so smart. He already knows that he has an older sister and, unlike adults, is in full confidence that someday she will come back and take him to the park for a walk. Evenings. Announcer glanced at the clock. It was almost 6 o'clock. The plan was to visit more of the local botanical garden. Nuts had been told in one voice that visitors to the city were amazed by this attraction. What garden now? Fox glimmered hope that some information about it would soon surface. That's what was so frightening about it. The kid was selling old toys, starting to pack up. William watched from afar as the place was quickly stocked, unsold, and merchandise. In a large branded supermarket bag, the teenager walked out of the mini market gate and headed toward the bus stop. William, keeping his distance, followed him. I wanted to stop the boy, shaken by the shoulders, demand an explanation. He must know what had happened to Alice. Except you can't do that. You can't do that. No way to cloud reason, no way to cloud emotion. William understood the need to proceed with the utmost caution. The slightest mistake could scare off the people holding Alice. William was sure that his daughter had been taken years ago and kept locked up alive and well all this time. All he needed to do was find her and set her free. The teenager did indeed come to a stop. William stood farther behind a newspaper stand as a bus approached. The boy slid through the open door. William, there was a lot of people on the bus behind him, so it wasn't hard to get lost in the crowd. The bus looped through the city streets at first, then suddenly turned onto a country highway. By that time, there were not so many passengers inside. But the boy, fortunately, sat with his back to his pursuer and, of course, did not notice the surveillance. People were getting off at the stops. It looked like a suburban neighborhood, stretched for kilometers. Private sectors, apartment blocks, vegetable gardens. Everything was gray, dreary, and hopeless. The boy was in no hurry to get out, even when only the two of them were left in the cabin. Finally, the boy jumped up and went to the front door. He glanced indifferently around the parlor, briefly fixing his attention on William. Surprised. Maybe a little at the fact that someone else was still on the bus. Usually he seemed to be the only one getting off at this stop. I guess the kid didn't recognize his customer or didn't seem to. William, so as not to make the teenager even more suspicious, didn't follow him. He drove literally 100 meters ahead, and then as if he realized, he asked the driver to stop. The man rushed back, holding on to the birch trees growing in a wall along the road. He was afraid that he had lost sight of the boy, that now he had long gone somewhere far away. But no, William was lucky. The teenager was standing right where the driver had dropped him off. This place, it wasn't even a bus stop. No benches, no shelter, just a pole with a name tag pierced through it. What was this village or the name of the neighborhood? The teenager hesitated because he had something wrong with one of his flip-flops. Like something sharp was stuck in it, and the boy was trying to get it out. Finally, he got it out and went on his way. William, of course, followed him relentlessly, always hiding behind some sort of cover. The terrain here was, of course, quite something, wanting no houses, barracks, or vegetable gardens. Only an overgrown wasteland scattered along it clusters of old poplars, 3 or 4 in number. At least there was a grove of birch trees along the vacant lot. William wandered along it, keeping his eyes on the boy, He was far enough away, about 50 meters, so they walked along parallel paths. Weird. It was as if the boy was from the past. It's not the modern way they look at it. Teenagers today have a very different look. Especially boys, they have a cocky, confident look. They think they're smarter than everyone else, but this one's a scaredy cat. You could see he didn't really want to go back to where he was going. Maybe he was looking forward to the reprisal for selling just one toy. For some reason, William felt sorry for the absurdly outgoing teenager. Finally, the boy reached the tall, blank fence that enclosed a fairly large area. The tin sheets were painted with green paint in some places. The fence rose high. There was not even a small slit in it, through which it would be possible to look inside. And you couldn't climb it without being seen. An impenetrable fortress. That's what it was. The kid walked up to the wicket, pressed the bell. After a while, the massive door creaked open. The teenagers were allowed into the territory, and then the door slammed shut. That was it. William watched the strange place from the woods. What the hell is this place? It's like a remote farmhouse with not a soul for miles around. It looks kind of ominous and suspicious. Who knows who lives there? Maybe ask around the nearest neighborhood. I'm sure the locals know. You're not exactly keeping a low profile. That's for sure. Call head-on asking the owners who they are and where their kid got his missing daughter's toy is also such a good idea. Did William's gut tell him it could be the intruders? They'd either eliminate William themselves or they'd smuggle Alice out, so no one will ever find her again. Does Alice really live in this dark place? Is she really so close behind that green fence? William struggled hard to fight the curb of all his emotions. It was important for him to remain master of the situation, to keep his feelings in check. Otherwise, it's easy to mess things up. Gradually, William's plan to ask people about this strange farm has matured. And then, perhaps, set up a lookout point right in this rush to get an excuse from the boss. But the man can't leave here now. Maybe Alice is close by. What if she needs help? At these thoughts, the man was beginning to get a large shiver. Interviews with the locals clarified the situation a little. William walked to the bus stop located a few kilometers away from Berezovka. It was a residential private sector, ordinary village houses and two-story apartment buildings. Children walking along the streets on bicycles, scraps of conversations coming from the fences, old men talking about something at the store. It was to these old men that William went with his questions about who was who, and they certainly must be in the know. It turned out that in Berezovka, behind the green fence, is a kind of private farm. The owner there is strange, unsociable, but honestly always offers first-class goods. And they don't jack up the prices. Cow goat milk, eggs, sometimes pork or beef, seasonal vegetables and fruits from the vegetable garden. And also dairy products, cheese, cottage cheese, sour cream. The locals claimed that people usually queue up in advance for the unloved Peter's goods. Everything is so tasty, one of the old men explained. He himself, Peter Strange, of course, added his words willingly left comrade. How many times we called him to sit down, talk about life, get better acquainted. He refuses. He keeps referring to important matters. Do they have children? You don't know? How could I not know? Yes, we do. His sons are grown up now. They're all teenagers. Only these boys don't socialize with our locals and never have. Like their father's a quiet, unsociable man. We don't see them much if we meet them suddenly. I don't think we'd recognize them. What about the school? William wondered. Children have to go to school. They're homeschooled, like Peter and his wife teach them themselves. And then the boys take exams separately from everyone else. And then they go on to the next grade. Our local kids say that the teacher sets these guys as an example for them, saying that they study well, diligently. Not like them local kids. William, after talking to the old people, got a bit downhearted. He was clearly told that his favorite farmer has only boys, sons growing up. No one's ever heard of the girl. On the other hand, the teenager had said that the stuffed rabbit had once belonged to his sister. William's heart suddenly clenched with horror. Maybe the kid meant that his sister didn't have one anymore. No, the boy had mentioned that his sister had grown up and didn't need a stuffed friend. There was a conversation, that's for sure. That same evening, William settled all the formalities, arranged with his boss for an unscheduled vacation, warned his wife. Jenna immediately realized that something had happened. She didn't believe the theory of a protracted business trip, so William told her everything. "We should go to the police," the wife exclaimed. "Mr. Rabbit is a powerful lead. What about you? It's not safe for you to go there yourself. Don't go in there alone anymore. You hear me? Everything's under control." William reassured her. "Of course, I'll go to the police. I just need to find out as much as I can about this strange family, about this farm. You remember how they've been treating my reports lately, don't you? They even stopped checking them. I need something more convincing than a stuffed rabbit." "I will. Just please be careful. How would you like to believe you really found Alice?" And so the days of surveillance dragged on. William would come in the early hours of the morning. He would take up his retail observation post and wait for the sounds of goats, cows mooing, chickens. Sometimes the peaceful hum of human voices. William listened, hoping to hear his daughter, but what came to his ears was mostly the confident and commanding voice of the master dispensing orders. The others were barely audible. It was impossible to make out who was speaking teenager, woman, girl. Everyone here seemed to have their own responsibilities. The same kid William met at the flea market. He headed to town every morning. He carried sacks filled with goods. Apparently, it was junk that the family preferred to get rid of for a small profit. Another boy, who looked to be the same age as the eternal salesman, drove a herd of tacks in the morning. William counted 7 slashes of 4 cows. That's a decent-sized farm. The owner himself left the house every day. The man seemed younger than William, but his thick beard and modern clothes gave him the appearance of an old man, or rather an old man. A plaid shirt for his excitement, wide pants, stomped and flip-flops on his feet. That one was still seen. This man drove a rusty truck, apparently driving his produce around the neighborhood and doing some shopping for the family. No one else left the house, but there were other people there. There were, as the men and teenagers went about their business. Voices could be heard over the green fence. There was a life going on, and a very active one, by the looks of it. Someone was working in the vegetable garden, cooking dinner, fixing something. What a strange family it was, wasn't it? In all the time that William had spent at his observation post, no one had ever come to visit them, or even for milk or eggs. Total isolation. It's been 2 weeks. William had already learned the family's daily routine. Each day was exactly the same as the last. No changes, no news, teenagers, boys. And the one selling things at the flea market, the young shepherd boy. Both of them looked haggard and indifferent. Sometimes they'd meet at the gate, on their way home, and there was none of the usual and normal brotherly bickering between them. These kids didn't pick on each other, didn't laugh together, didn't joke like other teenagers, just said hello and waited for the door to be opened. They stood quietly and silently, as if they were not 13 or 14 years old, but much older. They were old men. Maybe the boys aren't well, or someone has trained them in such a way that they are afraid to say a word to each other. Several times the man stopped himself from doing anything rash. He wanted to jump up to the owner of this house and ask him directly about Alice, if he was going to be sneaky and deny it. Beat him up. In any case, this farmer is an extremely unpleasant person. But this was not to be done under any circumstances. William would get nowhere and would only get himself into trouble. In the end, William decided that there was no point in waiting any longer. He wouldn't learn anything new about this family. It was time to take action. Time to go to the police. He was put in touch with the investigator, who had the Alice case in his desk for so many years. And the man told him about everything and the mystery of the rabbits, which is definitely a toy Alice rare toy, and even embroidered on the shirt flower. Accidentally got very many years ago in the hands of the girl. A family heirloom, you might say. William also told me about the strange farmhouse. He had to lie to make it convincing. The man added from himself that he'd seen bruises on the teenager, though that wasn't true. And he said he'd heard a woman screaming behind the fence as if she were being beaten. William hoped that these details would give the police more reason to be proactive than idle suspicion. Something very strange is going on that is incomprehensible. And Alice, she's probably there, I can feel it holding her back. The investigator, he dryly informed that he had accepted the information and that William would be informed when the check was made. The man continued his surveillance of the house. The cats were scratching at his soul. It seemed to him that the investigator did not take his call seriously. But the next day, 2 men in uniform knocked on the green gate. One of the guests was the very same investigator. William froze in anticipation at his observation post. He had not expected such a quick reaction. It seemed to him that he had been brushed aside like a pesky fly. But they hadn't come to check on him. As promised, the door was not opened to the representatives of the authorities immediately. They spent about 15 minutes waiting. All this time, they periodically pressed the bell button and insistently knocked on the door. It was simply impossible not to hear this. Finally, the door opened. There was a short dialogue. The policemen showed their ID to someone, and they were let inside. There were long minutes of waiting. It must have been about half an hour when the uniformed men finally came out into the street. They headed for the squad car. William rushed toward them. "What's going on?" "Oh, you're here?" The investigator was surprised. "What can I say? It's a big farm. People work hard. Everything is made by their own hands, furniture and buildings of all kinds. My sons work hard, not like their peers who have never held a hammer at that age. It's like they're all homeschooled kids. They have everything they need to live. Yeah, this family's been checked regularly by child welfare. The 3 sons are not sons. They were taken from the orphanage, so the family is watched. And there are no girls in this house," the second policeman added. "Only boys. And that's it." William asked disappointedly. "That's it. You won't check them anymore. In fact, it's an investigative secret. But I'll tell you as a father, we're on the verge of checking them again. Something's come to our attention." The investigator had known William for years and had a human connection to him. He himself had a daughter the same age as Alice. So the man understood the unhappy father's feelings and wanted to reassure him. "It's about Alice. It's not clear yet. I can't talk too much either. As soon as everything becomes known, I will immediately tell you. And another thing, we'll take you to the city now. You better not be here anymore because you don't know what's going on. They'll see you, and that could spoil everything." William, nodding his head in agreement, went back to the local hotel where he had rented a room all this time. He tried to distract himself, wondering if he should even go home. But then he banished that thought. No, here he is closer to Alice, probably. From the cops. William didn't get any more information. When would they come to check again? What had aroused their suspicion? When do we expect news? Not knowing is exhausting both mentally and physically. William felt as if he were back in the time when his daughter had just disappeared. Tagda an ne magast, spat, dumat o chem to drugum, krom ishesnovania Elisa, risavolvi golov versi odnu strashni drugoi. Something similar was happening now. The scary thing was that it might be revealed soon, right? And it could turn out to be very scary, no less terrifying than the other version. The cops never find out anything. And that Teddy Bunny trail, it'll turn out to be false. I don't know where these people found the toy. Maybe they found it in a dumpster years ago when Alice was first taken. The person who did this could very well have gotten rid of the stuff while they were waiting. It's been 4 days. William spent all that time in the hotel. He had promised the policeman not to make any mistakes around that green fence, hadn't he? This could ruin everything. And suddenly, there's a call. A call from an investigator asking William to come down to the station for a meeting. Did you find her? You'll find out officially on the spot. I need your cooperation. William, I don't remember how I got to my hometown. I think I caught a hitchhiker on the highway because I had to wait until evening for a bus. But William couldn't wait for that. He certainly couldn't. And finally, William is in the investigator's office. He looks at him carefully and sternly. That look had a sobering effect on William. The man pulled himself together, set himself up for a serious conversation. "Well," the investigator said, The place turned out to be very strange indeed. Even on our first visit there, a colleague noticed something suspicious, although at first glance everything was just fine. The young policeman, the investigator's partner, of course, immediately realized that only sons lived in the family. This was confirmed by the mother of the family, a complete quiet woman, so modest and fearful that they did not even dare to look the policeman directly in the eyes. But in the course of the inspection, the guy noticed something that alerted him. On a rope in the garden among the shirt pants, Shorts dried several dresses, and those dresses certainly didn't fit the lady of the house. They obviously belonged to someone more delicate. But who? If there are only boys in the house? The cops quietly reported their observation to the investigator, and they continued the search with most of it, so as not to arouse suspicion and the landlady who followed them. The men assured her that it was all a mere formality. It was just a signal from the neighbors. They heard some shouting from the fence. Meanwhile, they carefully examined the house, trying to find traces of the missing girl, combs, and mirrors. Women's shoes, some other female things seen in the house. All of these could have belonged to the mother of the family, but not those. Several dresses stuffed him and ropes. The policeman looked in the basement and attic, checked every outbuildings. The girl was nowhere to be found, nor was there any sign of her presence. But passing by the carpet hanging on the wall in the living room, the investigator caught a sound, as if someone had tripped somewhere behind the wall. Only who? All the boys were outside, and they were gardening. The landlady followed them like a shadow. Where did that sound come from? The investigator stopped, listened. But behind the wall, it was quiet now. There is a room of some kind. The man asked. In a deliberately indifferent tone, he waved toward the carpet. No, it's just that the wall is thick on that side, and the whole house was conceived in winter. So we made the wall denser and strengthened the insulation. My husband's a good man, and my sons are growing up the same way. Did you hear that sound? Asked the investigator to his colleague when they left the strange house. Yeah, it's a secret room, and they're hiding someone. It was hard to get a search warrant with a task force. Too little evidence, too vague suspicions, but the investigator did it. I had to embellish the facts, tweak some documents. But those girls' dresses and the sound behind the wall kept him on his toes. Couldn't a man dismiss that evidence? He just couldn't. The investigator was taking a risk. If nothing had been discovered, he would have been in huge trouble, up to and including criminal liability. But the task force did find the secret room. The guys took the carpet off the wall, and there was a door, so thin, painted in the color of the wall. The secret room contained 2 narrow beds. On one of them, hugging each other, sat 2 very young girls, about 16 or 17 years old. The sight of the policeman made them truly terrified. They screamed and fought back. Both of them were convinced that these men in uniform were trying to harm them. The girls were very afraid of strangers and were hysterical. The owners of the house were detained until the circumstances were clarified. Teenage boys were placed in temporary detention shelters. But the girls were sent to a dispensary, as both clearly needed the help of specialists. Alice was one of these girls, and Alice was amazed at what she had heard. William looked at the investigator and waited for an answer. We believe so, he nodded. Take a look at these photos. You'll recognize them. The first photo showed a dark-haired, frightened girl. Long hair the color of relaxed chocolate. Black eyes, not Alice. But the second picture, William even gasped as he looked at it. It was his daughter. Of course, she had grown up a lot, but not to recognize Alice Williams simply could not. Blonde curls below her shoulders, huge, wide-open blue eyes, a mole on her shoulder. That's her. How do I see her? Great, the investigator glowed. It was visible that he was not to the end. I'm sure it was Alice who found it. About seeing her. No luck with that yet. Specialists are working with the girls. Their psychic girls have been subjected to years of processing. They perceive the world around them as hostile. Boys are easier. At least they've been released into society. They had more will. They suffered less. Although there's a lot of psychology work to be done there too. I'll probably tell you girls everything in order. But later. And I can't wait. Understand, we are still investigating the circumstances of what happened. It's already a high-profile case. Even though I'm making a thriller based on this story, it's the first time I've come across something like this. Alice. Is her life in danger? No, physically, she's perfectly healthy. Mentally, she'll be fine. Teenagers are very flexible. Their adaptability is high, so I want to see my daughter. You'll have to pull yourself together later. Wait a little longer. As soon as we're clear, I'll let you know right away. I promise. Alice, she's not ready for this meeting yet. That's the expert's opinion. You can definitely trust them. We should wait. It's better this way. And the investigator wasn't fooled. He called William 2 days later and invited him to talk to him again. All this time, the man had been worried sick. He now knew where his daughter was, but they wouldn't let him see her. It was assured that it might harm Alice. It was too early for an appointment, so the doctors said. Jenna was worried along with William, but she kept repeating to her spouse that all the worst is over. The main thing is that Alice has been found. She is alive and well. Of course, the girl is in deep stress, but she will be helped by specialists. William, I hoped his wife was right. I wanted to believe her. William and Jenna went to the meeting with the investigator together. Little Tim was left with the neighbors. They were also very worried about Alice's fate and supported her parents as best they could. It's an unusual story, to say the least. Please be calm, warned the investigator. But the main thing is that everything ended well. Alice, as an 11-year-old teenager, was still very worried about her mother's departure. And then her father brought a new wife into the house. This girl perceived as a betrayal, but did not show it. She generally all emotions and thoughts after the death of her mother kept to herself, which is not too useful for children of her age. And then suddenly, the news of Jenna's pregnancy. Alice felt completely unnecessary. Soon there would be a new baby in the family. What was she Alice for then? First, there was no mom, and now the little baby will also take the daddy. The girl felt bad, very bad. Parents saw it, tried to get through to her, but nothing worked. But school security guard James unexpectedly succeeded. Attentive and sensitive men often saw a sad girl sitting alone by the window. Her classmates were having fun, chasing each other, figuring things out. The fox sat on the windowsill and looked into the distance, waiting for the end. Change was thinking, apparently about something of his own. He came to her, once started a conversation about something insignificant. He looked attentive and warm. His words sounded soothing, and so began this strange friendship between the girl and the guard. By the way, James talked to many students, both boys and girls. He understood kids. He had a way with each one. And the man was not above teaching, of course. He went to school for a completely different purpose. Alice didn't notice how she trusted James completely. She was misunderstood at home. Tried to placate gifts, all dragged somewhere. Therme sewed Lisa. All she needed was someone to talk to about her mom. Someone who was almost physically painful for her father to talk to. Stepmother did not know Alice's mother at all, and treated her most likely as a rival. School guard, he always listened to Alice carefully. Sometimes to the place inserted some lines, sometimes told about his childhood. It was James who gradually became the closest person to Alice. The man willingly agreed with the girl's arguments that she no longer needed her father and did not try to change her mind like other adults. Of course, he is understandable. He's got a new family, a baby on the way. Are you superfluous there? Alice nodded her head sorrowfully. She knew it herself. The adult only reinforced the girl in her speculation. Thought things were getting worse and worse. The stepmother was annoying. The father in general, and turned on by his betrayal. The little girl, and did not realize that they are experienced manipulators. James deliberately exacerbates the gulf between her and her family, and he becomes the main person for the unhappy girl. James, he had a dream from his youth to become the head of a large community that lives by its own rules, not by the schemes imposed by society. Physical labor, simple food. A minimum of goods, civilization like TV, computer, and similar inventions. He saw himself in sweet dreams at the head of a long table. On both sides there are people, old adults, teenagers. And for all of them, he is the main master, benefactor, and protector. Where did such thoughts come from in the young man's mind? It's hard to say. Once I came across a program about hermits and old believers, got interested in this topic, started reading relevant books, watching thematic movies, and I became interested in the idea. Who was he in this life? The son of a cleaning lady, a poor loser with no education and no future. He wanted the power of a well-fed life, and the guy saw only one way to get it all, to start his own community. Maybe there's a mental illness mixed in with it all. Well, a normal person can't do that. James is being worked on by psychiatrists, among others. We don't have the results of the evaluation yet, so there's no way to know for sure. As soon as James' mother died, he immediately sold her apartment and bought land in a remote corner for nothing. A lot of land, and the work began. For the rest of the money, the man bought building materials with the help of local alkas, ready to work for a bottle, erected a house, then slowly encircled it with a tin fence. But all this took time and money. But James spared no resources for his dream. The man worked as a security guard at a supermarket. After putting up a house, he decided it was time to get a couple. It had to start somewhere, building a community. The chosen one for James was Anna, a quiet, modest girl who worked in the same supermarket as a cleaner. Anna was orphaned at an early age, lived alone in a rented apartment. No education, no ambitions, no hopes for a happy future. Her father was very strict. He beat his daughter for the slightest disobedience. That's how Anna's character developed. Quiet, preparing the guided at the same time economic hand. Just what you need. You couldn't find a better wife. James met Anna. The young people dated for a while. The man shared with her his plans for the community, and Anna was delighted with such ideas. They got married. Anna moved into James' home and began to settle in. The couple had 3 sons, one after the other. Anna no longer worked. She took care of the house, the garden, the kids. James slowly expanded the farm, setting up barns, buying livestock. Learning to be a farmer, it wasn't easy for a city dweller, but James was willing to do a lot for his dream. The community was a long way off. While they were just an ordinary family with many children, they needed workers. The sons had grown up, of course. Now they were working almost as hard as their father. James did not raise them spoiled tender, and scientists from them to make them did not intend. Although the middle one clearly shone with mathematical ability. All the sons were homeschooled, so they wouldn't have to spend much time at school. And James needed more children. Anna could no longer get pregnant. Apparently, giving birth to 3 weather babies had torn something in her body. So the couple decided to take the kids from the orphanage. James reasoned that this was even better. They could take teenagers at once. They would become helpers faster than newborn babies, which still need to be raised. James dreamed of taking a whole team, 4, boys and girls. That would be a great start for the community. But it wasn't that simple. The family didn't qualify financially. The security guard's salary only allowed for 3 kids. So there were 3 new sons in the house, who were only a couple or 3 years younger than the birth children. But that wasn't enough for James, very little. The household had grown. His wife did not have time for herself and the house, and with the animals, and in the vegetable garden. James planned to increase sales of farm produce. You've got to get money from somewhere. Otherwise, one cannot become the head of the community. After conferring with his wife, the man made an important decision. By the way, the meeting was purely formal. Anna always agreed with what her husband suggested. In general, James decided to take someone else's child, preferably a girl, so that she could be a wife's helper. The boys seemed to be enough for now. The man realized that this is risky and dangerous activities, and therefore prepared for it in advance. From the neighbors to hide the appearance of the child was easy. Everyone has long been accustomed to the fact that the family lives secluded and isolated. No one visits them, and from behind a blind fence, it is impossible to see what is happening in the yard. But here periodically visit the guardianship authorities. The children are adopted. Their fate is monitored. And these inspectors may notice something. That's why James built a secret room before he brought a stranger's baby into the house. where he planned to hide the girl when the inspection came. And in general, she will have to live somewhere for this assistant, who will grow up to be a wife to one of James' sons. When everything was ready, James began to look for the victim. It wasn't easy. The child, after all, he must want to leave the family, otherwise it will not work. Especially for this man got a job in a neighboring town school security guard just in the gymnasium where Alice studied. Now several 1,000 children constantly flashed before James' eyes. He saw all the kids from prosperous families, living a happy childhood, and students who clearly had something wrong. It was the unwanted and dysfunctional ones that interested the man in the first place. Of course, Alice quickly came to James' attention. The girl with sadness in her eyes avoided the society of her peers, an excellent candidate for foster daughters. At that time, James had already read a lot of psychological and literature. As a future community leader, he must be able to manipulate people. These skills came in handy in his communication with Alice, to find weaknesses, to press on the painful, to rub into confidence. None of this was difficult. Alice herself agreed to come to live with James in a place where abandoned and unwanted children find shelter, a place where everyone is needed and important. The little girl already considered herself superfluous in the family. James had also skillfully thickened the colors and turned the girl against the front rooms. In general, that morning, getting ready for school, Alice knew for sure that she would not return home in the evening. She was in anticipation of a new life, happy, bright, and interesting. She didn't want to stay in her father's family any longer, thanks in large part to James' efforts. While the police volunteer squad searched for Alice, while her father and stepmother were worried, the girl was learning new skills and getting burned out at James' house. She liked it quiet, peaceful, good here. Animals around: goats, cows, dogs, cats, chickens, and funny little chickens. Anna is always around. Alice is the only one in charge. She's so happy. She is so happy to have a girl in the house. Anna teaches her all the household tricks, how to clean the floors, bake bread, grow flowers. It's so exciting. The boys are great too. They're not like the boys at school. Those fools are different. They're attentive, smart, good. They know so much. They can do so much. Interesting. Except James is a little too strict with his own. Everything has to be on his family's rigid schedule. But that's not a bad thing if you look at it that way. Besides, with his sons, he could afford to be rude and curse, and even hit them, if anything. But James never touched her fox. He spoke to her calmly. He tried to explain everything in a quiet, ingratiating voice. The room, however, seemed to the girls strange, too cramped, without a window. But that's all right. But she had her own separate room. No one came in without knocking, no one prying into her soul. If she wanted to be alone, James worked as a security guard at the school for a while after Alice went missing and didn't quit. It could have aroused suspicion. I wrote a statement only 6 months later, when the search for the child had already passed its active phase. Around that time, Alice suddenly asked to go home. She missed her father and Jenna too. She also really wanted to see her brother, who, of course, had already been born. Alice was fed up with it all. Life on a schedule, hard work. Not having to study was a good thing, of course. The boys had to cram their lessons. They had to take exams every year. Alice has been spared from this duty, which cannot but be happy. Well, the rest in general, the girl wanted to go home at least to visit, just to see their own. Alice told James about her desire. She did not feel like a prisoner and believed that she could leave at any minute. He brainwashed the little girl again, told her about God, that all the people outside the fence were living sinful lives, while they had a righteous atmosphere here. They would all surely go to heaven later, and Alice too. Otherwise, the girl will never meet her mother in heaven, because she won't be able to live right there in the big world, and will have time to make sins. James was not a bad psychologist. He understood that the girl is very longing for her mother and pressed on the wound skillfully, almost masterfully. By the way, his sons and his wife, he also implanted in the consciousness of religious attitudes. It was easier to control them. Alice stayed in the James family. She changed a lot over time. The girl sincerely believed that her father and stepmother were evil, spoiled people. Meeting James and living in his family is the greatest good that ever happened to her. The man literally hypnotizes both Alice and the rest of the household. He seemed to believe what he was saying. The children were growing up. The household grew. The dream of a huge community grew closer. Soon sons would bring wives. There would be children, natives of the community. Soon James, as he had dreamed, would sit at the head of the table as the leader of a large group of people. Later, Kathy came into the family. A girl with a complicated fate was happy to finally find a home. Kathy had been running away from her drinking parents, feeding herself. She got through only one company of homeless people, and then to the other a couple of times got to the shelter, from where she was returned to her parents. They beat the daughter up, and she'd run away again and do it all over again. James spotted Kathy at the train station. He saw his man right away. The girl is broken, confused. She has no idea how to move on. That James knows how to help this teenager. Kathy, like Alice, once liked living behind the green fence. It was peaceful. It was a place where she wasn't bullied and where everything had a purpose. It was simple and clear. The girl, just like Alice, was in search, but she did not want to be found. That's the story, the investigator summarized, leading the frozen Jenna and William with his eyes. This is a nightmare. The woman covered her face with her hands, unable to comprehend what she had just heard. I did him. I snapped his head off. William clenched his fists so that the knuckles shared. Don't do that. He'll be held legally responsible for everything. Alice, the doctors won't let me see my own daughter. William growled. How many years have been lost? All because of this lunatic. It's not just that. Investigator James shook his head. He'd chosen his victim carefully. The circumstances were such that your daughter was the perfect choice. She went after him. Take advantage of the girl's grief, scumbagize her, and further cripple her psyche. I don't know if she'll recover from all this now. Here I have good news for you, smiled the investigator. Yes, the specialists have had a hard time. James did a good job with Alice. Such talent should be put to good use. She didn't even want to see you at first. The world frightened her. No wonder she'd been behind a fence for so many years. Today the doctor said Alice wanted to see you. She asked for it. She's doing much better. You hear that? That's a great sign. Everything's gonna be okay.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Why are you sitting there? It's time. You know Michael won't be happy if you're late. Cindy stood up obediently. Sit or don't sit, it won't change anything. You have to go and do your duty. Michael was very good at getting girls into debt. And what was his sense of smell? He unmistakably determined that the girl is in some delicate or desperate situation, and immediately did so to finish the crush. Cindy came to the city like so many others for a better life. She didn't run away, but her grandmother, with whom she lived, was gone, and she had nothing to do there. The village didn't like her grandmother. She was a mean, angry old woman. She didn't like Cindy. She chased her all the time. If other girls bathed at the lake, Cindy had to weed something in the vegetable garden. She could only bathe in the evening. Usually, after all the work was done, Grandma would say, "Go to the lake, rinse yourself, or the laundry is often washed, it will spoil." Cindy obediently took a towel and went for a swim. The mosquitoes were chasing her in clouds, and she had to dive every now and then to keep them away. But she was happy. Her body seemed to calm down from the heat and from fatigue. Grandma was gone when Cindy turned 17. Cindy didn't shed a tear, and a week later, after collecting all the money she had in the house, which was not a small amount, she closed the house and went to town. True, the box with large earrings and ring, which grandmother wore on holidays to take with her, did not become. She hid them in the basement, let them lie. When she settled down, she would come back for them. Let the memory be. They were made of some cheap material, like silver, but obviously something else. Her grandmother would never splurge on expensive ones. Cindy was a serious girl, and you had to thank her grandmother for that. She wasn't afraid of any work, because she knew how to do everything. She was going to the city for a reason. Cindy was going to study. She calculated everything. For the first time she will have enough, and then she will find some part-time work. She will definitely find it, but everything went completely wrong. When she arrived in the city, she was literally deafened by the sounds. Everything was so big, glowing, and terribly unfamiliar. Cindy was carrying a large bag on her shoulder, but she wasn't looking where she was going. She was looking at the town. Yeah, their town wasn't even close. What was it? As she went to the center of her town, she could walk around the whole city in an hour, and here was such splendor. Young lady, why don't you look where you're going? Cindy felt at the last moment that she had impaled someone with her bag. A young man stood in front of her. He had a cup in his hand, but the coffee from the cup was dripping down his shirt. Oh, I'm sorry. Cindy wanted to apologize, but seeing the displeased look on the man's face, she went on the offensive. You're running like a madman. You saw the bag I was carrying. It was easier for you to go around, and if you don't watch your step, that's your problem. The look on his face became such that the girl couldn't stand it and laughed. All right, I'm sorry. The man suddenly smiled. My name is Liam, and I'm Cindy. Where did you come from, Cindy? I'm here. I'm on the train over there. You're going to theater school, I suppose. Cindy blushed. Why theater school? It's like there's nowhere else to study. You're not going to theater school. No. Cindy would never have admitted that that was why she had come here. But after the man's words, she realized that there were plenty of people like her in the city. Of course, she had known about it before, but now she clearly realized how naive she was, no different from the others, the same fools. Where are you going? Cindy wanted to argue again that she wasn't going anywhere, but she didn't. Looking for a room or something to rent, or something for the first time? Well, it's complicated. Do you know what the prices are around here? I know, of course, but I'm not poor. The man looked at me doubtfully. You know what? I've got someone who can help you. Shall we? And he strode off with determination. And Cindy remained standing at a loss. Where shall we go? Why shall we go? He turned around, sighed, and walked back. Why are you standing there? Come on. Don't be afraid. Liam picked up her big bag and started walking again. Cindy had no choice but to follow him. Where are we going? To my aunt's. She has a big apartment and sometimes rents out rooms. Plus, she can help with work. You need a job, don't you? Very much. I'll take any job. Liam looked at her strangely and grinned. Liam's aunt turned out to be a peculiar woman. She immediately outlined Cindy's chores, gave her a reasonable price, and simply left the room. Cindy looked at Liam confusedly. Don't worry, she's all right, but she's been in the trade for many years and is very successful, so you won't see each other much. For the first few days, Cindy hardly left the house. Accustomed by her grandmother to cleanliness, she washed everything, rubbed everything, even received praise from Vanessa. Well done. I see you like order. I'll take a little off your paycheck so you can keep cleaning. Oh, it's no trouble at all. A few days later, Liam invited her for a walk. Cindy was so excited. It's a shame. Liam had a real crush on her. She chose the best dress she could find and even put a little mascara on her eyes, which she had bought the other day at a neighbor's store. If she had mascara before, her grandmother would have made her eat it. Liam looked at her carefully. Wow, you're really pretty. Cindy blushed, and Liam suddenly thought that she had never been with anyone before him. The thought was absurd, of course, but he decided to ask, "Are you blushing like you've never been complimented before?" "No, I haven't. My grandmother, if she saw me talking to a guy without doing anything, she'd howl." Liam felt his palms sweating. An innocent girl in this century, how could that be? He ran his finger down Cindy's cheek. "Well, shall we go for a walk or to a cafe?" Cindy smiled. "Let's go for a walk. I haven't seen anything yet." They wandered for a long time. Liam was a real expert on the city. He seemed to know everything. The girl listened to him with her mouth open, and she realized that she had never met anyone smarter and more attractive than Liam. A week later, Liam invited her to his house. Cindy understood why, but she was sure it was the right thing to do. They would get married, and everything would be fine. She had never dreamed of such a turn. Everything was working out just as well as it could. Vanessa watched Cindy getting ready. "Where are you going? I haven't seen you studying for college. You're still dating." "Isn't that my Liam?" "Him? What's wrong with that?" "I don't know, girl. It's up to you to decide. But our Liam is no good, only trouble. Keep that in mind." "No way. You just don't know him. He's good, really." Well, happiness is real." Vanessa laughed, and Cindy decided that as soon as she got a job, she would change the apartment. She didn't like that woman. In the evening, Liam met her and took her home at once. "I'm sorry, I don't have much to offer, because my colleague's mother died. So we all contributed as much as we could, so we couldn't leave a friend in need." Cindy looked at Liam with such adoration that he even smiled. "What are you doing?" "Liam, you are like that, and don't worry, we live in the modern world. Let's go to the store and buy something tasty." Liam shook his head. "No, you don't have to. It's not nice. I'll pay you back as soon as I get my paycheck." Cindy almost shrieked with joy. He said it as if he meant that Cindy would always be there for him. "Oh, who cares what we count now?" They went into the store, picked up some delicacies and wine, and went to Liam's. Cindy looked around with interest. A typical bachelor's apartment. Cobwebs in the corners on the ceiling, a mountain of unwashed dishes delicately covered with a towel. They settled into a room where it was obvious that Liam was trying to tidy up. After the first drink, Cindy, who never drank, became hungover when Liam held out his arms to her. She stepped towards her without a second thought. In the morning, Liam woke up and didn't find Cindy around. He thought she had left and breathed a sigh of relief. She was certainly a pretty girl, and it was her first time with him, but she was completely inexperienced. Liam liked to take pleasure, not give it. The fact that she was gone meant he wouldn't have to say all those unpleasant, "Cindy, what kind of marriage?" It's not fashionable now, and nobody needs it. It's a relic of the past, weddings, rings, holidays. Or is that all they do in your village? "Well, I'm sorry. This is not a village." Liam pretended to be offended and turned away. Cindy immediately hugged him. "Oh, come on. I was just saying that. I'm sorry. Are you moving?" "Of course." Liam smiled contentedly. He didn't meet anyone at home. He preferred to do it on someone else's territory, so that he didn't have to clean up and take care of things. But everything was going so well here, Cindy would obey him without complaint. He already understood her character, so there would be no problems with her. Moreover, he decided to tell her that he had difficulties at work, let her get a job on her own, and run the household on her own money. Why? It will work out very well. He will rest and have fun, and at home he will have order, cleanliness, and food. And of course Cindy, who will never refuse him anything. A month later, Cindy was already working 2 jobs. She fed Liam delicious dinners, washed, ironed, and even bought him new clothes. Lion would hug her affectionately and say, "How did I live without you before? I don't understand." Cindy laughed happily. "Liam, I don't understand how I lived without you. I didn't live at all." 6 months passed and Cindy's euphoria slowly subsided. She began to look at things more soberly and realized that everything is not so rosy in her life as it seemed before. First of all, although she worked like an ox, there was no money at all, and even the money that had been hers personally was gone. It was very strange, considering that Cindy had hardly any new things, but Liam's closet had changed almost completely. Secondly, Cindy wondered if Liam was spending too much time on a job that he wasn't paid for. And thirdly, Cindy was beginning to realize that she was a complete idiot. Does Liam have this very job at all or not? She sat down on a chair in the kitchen, looked around the room, the curtains on the windows. She bought them. The pot in which the soup was boiling, she bought them too, and the soup that was boiling in the pot was hers too. The girl got up, turned off the gas. She would not cook anything. And after all, only 6 months ago, she dreamed that she would enter the study, that she would have a normal life. Cindy suddenly thought that Vanessa had not warned her in vain. Apparently, she knew her nephew well. Cindy got ready and went for a walk. The weather was nice. She'd have to stop by work and tell her she wasn't coming back. No, of course she'd leave her alone. She had to live somehow. Liam would see that she wasn't there and that nothing had been cooked but the first meal, and she would think about it. She came home in the dark. She had rehearsed her speech all the way, but Liam was not at home. It makes sense. He'd say it was another work emergency. Cindy sighed. How frustrating was that? Well, the main thing was to talk to him. Then everything would become clear. Liam came in the morning. He took something out of the refrigerator, trying not to rattle, and sat down to eat in the dark. Cindy turned on the light. Liam looked up at her. "Hi, what are you doing up?" "Liam, we need to talk." He grimaced. It was a friend of his, to whom Liam hadn't been able to repay his debt for a long time. He had lost a little, then he wanted to win back, but he had lost even more. Once again, Liam regretted that the world technologies were developing so fast. There were no cell phones before, and there was no need to always answer the phone. No home in that, was it? A good excuse, but now try not to answer, and then you can answer and end up in the hospital. "Yeah, Michael, hi." "Hi, Liam. Is it just me, or are you avoiding me?" "Michael, of course it's me." "Then I don't understand why we don't see each other very often. I think we should meet to discuss some things." Liam sighed tiredly. "Where should I go?" "You don't need to go anywhere. I'll come to you myself. I know the address." Michael disconnected. Liam wiped the sweat from his forehead. It wasn't funny anymore. He tried not to tell anyone his address at all, so that there would be a place no one would know about, and now Michael had found out everything. Liam looked longingly out the window. Hiding was not an option. Sooner or later he would have to go home, but the debt would be much bigger. Cindy had just come home from work when the doorbell rang. "Cindy, we have guests today, a colleague from work." The girl splashed her hands. "Why didn't you tell me? I would have cooked something delicious. It's fine as it is." Michael was alone, but Liam had no doubt that there were some tough guys waiting for him somewhere in the entryway. "It's cozy at your place." Michael looked at Cindy. "Liam, didn't you say you had such a beautiful wife?" Liam gritted his teeth. It's not a wife, it's Cindy. The girl snorted resentfully and went into the kitchen. When Michael and Liam were seated at the table, she said, "Well, you two are talking, and I'm going to bed. I have to work early tomorrow." She slipped out of the door, terribly anxious to hear what they would talk about, but Liam was tense. Apparently it was his boss. Let them be there and Cindy sleep. Michael ate quietly. "And you're Cindy. She's a very decent cook, I know." Liam mumbled, not lifting his eyes from his plate. "And she works, and she must be from a decent family. She's got no one and comes from the middle of nowhere. Did you come to talk about Cindy?" Michael looked at him thoughtfully. "If you don't want to talk about Cindy, let's talk about you. I'm listening to you." "Me? Sure. I don't owe you money. You owe me money." "Michael, I'll give it to you as soon as I get it." Michael pushed the plate away. "You realize this is kindergarten. Maybe you'll have them in 10 years when they won't be worth anything?" Liam was silent. "Liam, this girl, do you love her? Are you going to get married?" Liam couldn't help smiling. "To Cindy? What, am I sick? Why don't we want her, you country bumpkin? She cooks, cleans, buys groceries. That's all she's good for." "I wonder." Michael was tapping his fingers on the table. "Listen, Liam, you can not only pay me back, but also earn money." Liam looked at Michael in surprise. "How?" "Well, if you don't feel sorry for Cindy, are you saying that she has no family?" "No." "Michael, I don't feel sorry for her. You can have her. What do you want me to do?" They talked for a long time. Michael left after 2 o'clock. That night, Liam was very tender and gentle with Cindy. She even changed her mind about the scandal because she could see how much Liam loved her, but she still had to talk. In the evening, when she came home from work, to her surprise, she found Liam at home. He was lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling. "Liam, is something wrong?" He looked at her sadly and turned away to the wall. Cindy was frightened. She sat down next to him. "Liam, what's wrong? Tell me, come on." He sat down on the couch. "Yes, I guess we need to talk. I've been keeping it from you, but things are getting out of hand. You see, I've been out of work for 4 months now, ever since I was diagnosed. I thought treatment wouldn't take up much of my time, much less money." Liam saw the horror-filled eyes of Cindy and continued even more tragically. "At the moment there is movement towards recovery, but there is no money, and there are huge debts that people are starting to claim." He talked for a long time. Cindy only realized that money was needed, lots of money, or her loved one would die. It was only now that it all came to her. She realized how skillfully she had been swindled, having driven her colleague into debt, and not just driven, but under receipts. Though if she hadn't had them, she couldn't refuse. She would have been forced to. Cindy went out to get the girls. Michael was already waiting for them. "All right, my chicks, ready to work?" One of the girls laughed. Cindy looked at him gloomily. Michael pinched her quite contentedly. "Why are you looking at me like a beast? It's not like I'm forcing you. Just pay your debt and walk free. Kathy is working with pleasure. She has found her vocation." Cindy looked at him angrily. "Go to hell. You'll choke someday." Michael snorted angrily. "I'd like to give you a punch that you'd remember for the rest of your life, but I can't. There's a very important man waiting for you, and your client is paying you very well. So I can leave you soon." "Well, we'll see, we'll see." Cindy got into the car. She knew who Michael was talking about. She had been taken to the same client lately. It was an elderly man in a wheelchair. Cindy loved going to see him. They didn't sleep, even though that's why she was taken away for debt. They would talk, watch comedies, eat, and Cindy would just sleep it off. Charles had a son who lived abroad and couldn't come back now because he was under contract. Charles was not a poor man himself, and his son sent him good money all the time so that an old man like Charles could afford it. Cindy had started going to him a month ago. She didn't know how much the clients paid. She only got a little if they gave her something. Each of them was usually escorted to the door by a bald guy named Ethan who took the money. Then in the morning, or when he had time, he would collect the girls. Charles met her in the hallway. "Cindy, I was afraid I hadn't made it. I can't get your boss on the phone. They've invented a newfangled connection, but they can't think of one that works well." Cindy smiled. Charles was always cursing everything modern, saying it was better before. And now there's no privacy at all. Think about it, Cindy. It used to be that a man went on vacation, went to the country, and that was it. Everyone knew that he would return on such and such a date, and no one touched anyone. But now at any moment at work will be called, and if somewhere the phone sat down, then in an hour everyone is on the ears, not a life, but a glass showcase. In some ways she agreed with him, but she liked to argue. Sometimes they spent the whole evening arguing. They met by chance. Cindy went out during the day. Once a month, when there were women's days, girls were given days off. Some went out. Some visited relatives. It was on one of those days that she met Charles. Cindy liked to think about anything extraneous and just walk. When she went somewhere far away, she would start a game, trying to get back to the center without questioning the passers-by. That day she wandered for a long time, wandered into some cottage community, and realized she was completely lost. There were no passers-by, so Cindy sighed and pulled out her cell phone. Only the phone was a nuisance. It just died. "Shit. Can I help you, sweet girl?" Cindy turned around in amazement. In the 3 years she'd worked for Michael, no one had ever called her that. Very close behind a wrought iron fence sat a man in a wheelchair. He was dressed like he was going to a ball, black suit, white shirt, bowdy. The man intercepted her gaze, smiled. "I like, to be always in uniform." A pun, of course, but at least with clothes on. Cindy smiled. The man reminded her of some fairy tale character. Not even a fairy tale character, just an ancient one. From a time where good manners were still honored. "Hello, I'm a little lost, and my phone is dead." The man smirked. "I've always said these newfangled things are unreliable. If you had a guidebook in your purse, you wouldn't be lost. My name's Charles, by the way. My name is Cindy. Why are we talking over the fence? If you're not in a hurry, I'd love to buy you a nice cup of tea, and then Sebastian can take you." Cindy didn't hesitate. She said yes. Why should she be afraid? She had been in such trouble for 3 years that it seemed she was not afraid of anything. Sebastian turned out to be a gardener, driver, and houseworker in one person. He was only a little younger than the owner, and at first he looked at Cindy disapprovingly. Then, really nothing, even drove her to the store a few times on Charles's behalf. On one of those trips he said, "I thought you were trying to rob my master?" Cindy was surprised, wanted to be offended, but then realized how it looked from the outside and simply replied, "Don't think so. Charles, almost the only person in this world who has treated me well, not as a thing, but as a person. I would never hurt him, never plot against him. That's a good thing. Master's been through a lot in this life. He wasn't always like this. Besides, the doctor said he had a chance to get back on his feet, except that he didn't want to." Cindy asked in surprise, "Why? I actually thought he was always like this." "No. Years ago he was driving a car with his family in it. He has a family, He did. He lost control of the car and went off the road. His wife was killed, he was left disabled. And the son was fine, except the guy got a massive shock. For 2 years he was observed by doctors, and then when he recovered, he blamed everything on his father and practically stopped communicating with him. Then when he grew up, he went abroad and doesn't even call him. Well, Charles also blames himself for everything, and that's how he punishes himself. He doesn't think that's punishment enough for him. You know, Cindy, before you showed up, he didn't even talk to anyone. He sat in his room. I even brought him food. Cindy was so upset. Oh, how awful. He's so kind, so wonderful. How old is your son? He is now. Sebastian thought for a moment. 27 or 28. And how long has he been separated? Since he was 20, when he left on vacation and never came back. He and his father had a big fight before he left. I heard Robert telling him everything. Charles tried to say something at first, but then he shut up. That's it. They haven't spoken since. Well, you can't do that. Doesn't he understand? I guess not. You see, whether it's my father or Robert, they have the same character. Neither of them will ever make the first move. Cindy thought, oh, I wish I could talk to that Robert. Explain, but you can't. Charles would not forgive her for such an intrusion into his private life. The first time she told Charles, he'd looked at her for a long time. So you're not doing your duty. Well, yes, but we have to do something. What? Who needs me here with my claims? I've got no one. I'm not from around here. I don't think Michael didn't have it all figured out. She waved her hand. I'm not a person at all now, and I'm not going to change anything. The man wanted to say something else, but didn't. But just 3 days later, the order came in for the whole weekend. It wasn't bad money, but the girls were afraid of such orders. Cindy was afraid too, but judging by the glint in Michael's eyes, he was paid well, which meant he wouldn't be overplaying anything. She said goodbye to the girls just in case and got into the car with Ethan. He drove off, silent as always. What was her surprise when the car stopped in front of that very cottage? True, she was a little upset then. She had such a good impression of the owner of the house, and now it was crumbling like a house of cards, but Cindy was worried for nothing. They had dinner, then sat on the veranda, and she was sent to her own room to sleep. It was only then that Cindy realized that this nice older man had just decided to let her rest. The first thing after the bedroom door closed behind her, she burst into tears. It was so unusual to feel cared for. It was the first time she slept peacefully, ate, even went swimming in the pool, sometimes even forgetting what her life had become. And how much they talked. About everything, life, books, movies. When Charles found out that Cindy hardly knew any movies, he was very surprised. Don't you like to watch melodramas, for example? All girls love them. I don't know, I guess I do. My grandmother didn't have a TV because you have to pay extra for electricity. Liam had no time to watch. I'd come in from my second job and just fall over. And now I don't have time for movies. Cindy, have you met Liam? I mean, it's all his fault. I tried. I waited for him at his house. He was with some girl. Anyway, he said he hated talking to people like me. From then on, Cindy had an occasional vacation. She was ashamed that Charles would give her that kind of money, but he wouldn't listen. Before Cindy and Ethan could drive away, a cab pulled up in front of the house. No one got out of it for a long time. Then the door opened and Lisa literally fell out of the car. She had been working at Michael's a little longer than Cindy had. The girl was badly beaten up and practically unsteady on her feet. Cindy rushed to her from the car, She looked at her friend with a distraught look in her eyes. House 56. Never go there. It's better from the bridge. And Lisa cried. She was led into the driveway, and Cindy got back into the car. It was quite possible that she too would someday return in the same condition, or not at all. That could happen too. In the evening, Charles asked, "Are you looking a little gloomy today?" Cindy told him everything. He listened attentively, silently, his fingers drumming on the table. "Tell you what, Cindy, give me the coordinates of your Michael. You got a personal number?" "Yes. Why do you need it?" "We need it." Cindy wrote the number on a napkin. "Now, girl, why don't you go to bed?" In the morning, Cindy woke up late. Strange, why hadn't they come for her yet? Shit, Michael's gonna yell and probably give her a ticket. She'll never pay off that debt. Charles was downstairs in his chair. "Oh, you awake, Cindy?" "Yes, I'm sorry. I've got to run." "No need. Sit down. Pour yourself a cup of coffee." Cindy stopped confused, sat down, poured coffee, and only then was surprised to see that Charles had her passport in front of him. "Oh, where did you get it? Did you kill Michael?" The man laughed. "To be honest, I really wanted to, but I had to pull myself together. I paid your debt, or rather that man's debt. I was going to ask you if you don't mind if I ask him later. Does he have that debt? Paid?" Cindy was suddenly in tears. "How could you do that?" "You're the—" "Thank you." She wiped her eyes. "And you'll have to ask him. Double or triple?" "That's good." "Cindy, I'm not insisting, but I wonder if you could stay with me for a while. You need to study, and I'll be less bored." A year passed. Cindy entered the institute, but without Charles' help, she would not have passed any exams. For 3 months, he literally kept her awake. She read, she counted, she crammed. She went to the exam like a robot, and like a robot she passed. That day they had a real party. Cindy bought a cake, Sebastian cooked meat, and Charles entertained everyone with jokes. When Sebastian went home and they were sitting around a small fire, Cindy couldn't stand it. "Tell me, did you have a family?" And Charles told everything, how he loved his wife, how he loved his son, and how he had lost both him and her. "How could that be? You need to try and talk to him now. He's an adult now, an adult." "No, Cindy, that's just it. He's grown up, he's a real man, but he hasn't changed his mind, and he's never even tried to talk to me. The last time I tried was about 5 years ago, but my son didn't respond, so that's the way it is. I occasionally check in to see how he's doing. I know he's doing well, but for some reason he's not married yet." Cindy worked as hard as she could for her keep and lodging. She cleaned, cooked, made sure Charles took his medication on time. Sebastian breathed a sigh of relief. "Cindy, you have no idea what it meant to me to make pancakes. It was horrible. I spent 2 days researching each dish, and only then did I try to cook it." Cindy laughed. "I really like cooking, and I like everything very much." A year later, Charles fell ill. He caught a cold somewhere in the street, and then a complication developed. He flatly refused to go to the hospital. The doctor came to his house. Cindy looked at the face of the one who had given her hope for life and realized that she would not survive if something happened. Charles was hardly eating. Nothing pleased him, and then she made up her mind. She went to his study at night when the master of the house was asleep. She explored the contents of the drawers for a long time and finally found a notebook that contained his son's address. Not only the address, but also his phone number. It took her another day to work up the courage, and then she dialed the number. The phone was not answered for a long time. Finally, A man's voice answered, "Hello. Hello, you don't know me. My name is Cindy. I live with your father." "Is that a mistress?" "But I'm not interested. What do you want?" Cindy thought he didn't hang up right away. That was good. That's what she was afraid of. "Listen, don't hang up. I'll tell you everything. I'll tell you everything. It's up to you to figure out what to do. Your father, he's in a lot of pain. He tries not to show it, but I've seen him sitting in his office several times, holding your picture and crying. Did he put you up to calling me?" Cindy was scared. "No, he doesn't know. He won't forgive me for meddling where I shouldn't. I wouldn't interfere. It's just that Charles is very ill at the moment. It may not be critical, but he's lost interest in life. I'm begging you. If you would come, he might feel better." The other end of the phone laughed. "Are you afraid of losing your daddy? Do you really expect me to believe you're all that sincere?" Cindy was sick of listening to this narcissistic asshole. You know what? A man who has blackness in his soul and sees it all around him. I have nothing more to say to you. You found the culprit for your mother's death, or rather, it's very convenient for you to blame it on your father, and you live your life in peace. And your father starts the morning thinking, "I wish I hadn't survived that accident. You're a cruel man, and I'm sorry I called you." Cindy disconnected and even threw the phone. I mean, really, why would she do that? She didn't want Charles to find out. The next day, Charles got worse. There was no change in his medical condition, but his mood. The doctor took Cindy aside as he left. "Cindy, Charles needs positive emotions as much as possible. You know, moping is very dangerous in his condition." "I understand. I'll try my best." "Yes, you will. Have a good day." The doctor left, and Cindy went to her room, but just as she reached it, the doorbell rang again. She took a quick step back. The doctor must have forgotten something, opened the door, and froze. There was a man standing in front of her. He was something elusive, similar to Charles, but looked much more powerful. "Is that you?" He looked at her mockingly. "It's me, and this is you. Come in, please." She backed away, and he stepped inside, tossing a large travel bag carelessly to the floor. "Sebastian, where?" "There's stuff in the car, presents." Sebastian appeared out of the ground, looked at the man for a moment, then rushed to him. "Kid, Uncle Sebastian." They hugged. Sebastian sort of even wiped his eyes. Come, make your father happy." Robert looked at Cindy confusedly. "How? Can you do that without warning? Is it all right?" She smiled. "Let's go quickly. What warning?" She opened the door to Charles' room. "Charles, you have visitors." The man reluctantly turned his head and froze. He looked silently at Robert, who was walking slowly towards him. "Son." "Robert." Cindy tactfully closed the door and went into the kitchen. She had to prepare something tasty, something festive. She had the salad ready. She put the meat in the oven, sat down, and Robert came into the kitchen. "Something smells delicious." She smiled. "Dinner will be ready in 200. Why don't you make some tea and sandwiches in the meantime?" "That would be great. I'm starving." Cindy began to make sandwiches quickly, and Robert watched her when the girl put a plate and a mug in front of him, said, "Well, tell me, Cindy, what are you doing in my father's house? That you're here out of the goodness of your heart, I don't need to tell you. I haven't believed in human souls for a long time." Cindy shrugged her shoulders. "That's your right. Everyone believes what they want to believe. But will you tell me you're not trying to marry my father?" "Marry Charles? Are you out of your mind?" Cindy immediately recognized that Robert was very handsome, probably spoiled by women's attention, and no wonder, but the way he behaved, the things he said, just repulsed her. He was so nasty. Why, a lot of girls your age only dream of such a husband. He's got money, but well, you know. Cindy, leaning over to him, was just bursting with anger. No, I don't understand. I don't understand the intricate plans and actions that are brewing in your sick brain. And please remember, I'm here because I'm very grateful to your father. He has helped me a lot in my life. You're a completely unreliable person, so I'll be with Charles until he kicks me out. Is that clear? Robert looked at her in a kind of admiration. It's clear. You just don't get to swinging your fists, or your eyes will be so glittering that you'll be impossible to handle. Cindy straightened up and walked out of the kitchen shaking. What a narcissist. What kind of a narcissist who thinks he knows everything? How could Charles, the smartest and kindest man in the world, have such a son? She looked into the room. Charles was asleep. On his lips was a smile. She smiled too and quietly closed the door. In the evening, Charles even sat at the table for a while, ate a little, which Cindy was terribly pleased about. The conversation was mostly between Robert and her father. So Cindy cleared the table, said good night to everyone, and went to bed. She had to go to the institute in the morning. She left when everyone was still asleep. The day flew by unnoticed. If earlier Cindy had been worried that Charles might need her help, now she was calm. She said goodbye to her classmates and headed toward home. Oh, what people, Cindy? She jerked and turned around. Lion was standing in front of her. Dan, that was someone she never wanted to see in her life. To be honest, she didn't think she ever would. The city was huge, just huge. You could live here all your life and never meet him. She turned away and wanted to leave, but Liam grabbed her arm. Where are you going, chick? You owe me something. Cindy tried to pull her hand away. I don't. You owe me something. Let go. But how can I let you go? It's not fair. You have a good life, and I have a bad one. Who picked you up? Who made you a town? You're a shitty village. Cindy yanked her arm away, and Liam let go of her, and she fell. She hit her elbow so hard that tears came out of her eyes. And at the same moment, someone picked her up and put her on her feet, and then she saw Liam's shoes fly up. Or rather, it was he who flew down, and the feet in his boots flew up. And then she saw Robert's face in front of her. Are you okay? I am. Why are you here? Oh, well, thanks a lot. Let's get in the car. Cindy let him drive her to the car, and when he closed the door behind her, she cried, Oh, God, what is it? Why couldn't she live in peace? Why does she want so much to forget the past? She did everything to never remember it. And then Liam. Now he knows where she goes to school. Cindy suddenly squeezed her eyes shut. What if he starts to scare her? What will he tell those she socializes with at the institute? About where she used to be, who she used to be. What to do? Robert got in the car, looked at her, held out a tissue, then sighed and touched off. When Cindy had calmed down a little, he asked, Well, who was it? It doesn't matter. Well, it doesn't matter. Then it doesn't matter. They drove home in silence. Already in front of the door, Cindy turned to him. Please don't say anything to Charles. I don't want him to be nervous. All right, if you say so. She knew that Robert was leaving in a week and decided that she just had to keep communication to a minimum. Charles was feeling much better. She lay awake all night, then decided that she should transfer to a correspondence school so she wouldn't need to be in the neighborhood much. And in the morning she got the news that made her clap her hands and scream like a little girl. At breakfast, Charles looked at her and said, Cindy, you'll have to live here alone, but Sebastian will be around. Why? She looked at him fearfully. "What's wrong? Where are you going? Are you worse? You don't feel well?" Charles laughed. "If you'll let me say just a few words to your endless questions, I'll answer you." Cindy gave an embarrassed yelp and fell silent. "You see, Cindy, my son insists that I go with him. There's a clinic there that's willing to operate on me. And they even say the chances are good. Here, Robert's gonna stay for a couple weeks while I get checked out, and then we'll fly out together. Just for a couple months. I hope I'll be back on my own." Cindy couldn't take it anymore. She threw her arms around both Charles and Robert. For some reason, however, Robert kept her in his arms a little longer than he should have, which confused her. In the evening before going to bed, Cindy looked at herself in the mirror, eyes burning, a smile on her lips. No, not again. She can't, she mustn't. But the girl already realized that she had fallen in love with Robert irrevocably. She went out onto the balcony as she was in her light pajamas. Cindy always did. The balcony connected several bedrooms on the second floor. Charles lived on the first floor, so no one was in her way. She leaned on the railing, then turned her back to it, and found herself nose to nose with Robert. God, she'd completely forgotten he was on the second floor, too. Robert looked at Cindy with an admiring gaze. She should have run away, but she couldn't. Her feet felt like they were stuck to the floor. "Cindy." His voice was hoarse, as if he was short of breath. He moved closer, and the girl just closed her eyes, feeling his lips on hers. 2 weeks flew by like a day. Cindy thought that all these feelings and experiences that are shown in movies are all far-fetched, but no, she felt like 10 heroines put together. For the entire 2 weeks, she woke up in Robert's arms. She was insanely embarrassed in front of Charles, because he knew everything about her past. How would he feel about their liaison? Robert had made far-reaching plans. He talked about the fact that in 6 months his contract would be up, and he would be back. He'll come back. They'll get married right away. You'll see, it'll be great. And Daddy will dance with you at our wedding. Every time Cindy looked at Robert asleep, she promised herself that she would tell him tomorrow. But each time she put it off. She was sure that Robert would push her away in disgust, and she wanted it so badly, another day of happiness. She made it to the day of their departure, and when the bags were packed, she sat down next to Robert. "We need to talk." Robert turned to her. "Is something wrong?" Cindy didn't have time to answer. Robert's phone rang, and he was speaking German, but even Cindy's knowledge of foreign languages was enough for her to realize that it was a woman calling and demanding to know when Robert would be back. Robert answered almost rudely, finally saying that he had asked her not to call. When he disconnected, Sebastian entered the room. "The carriage is here. We have to hurry. There's traffic in the city." Robert put his arm around Cindy. "I'll bring my father, and we'll talk about everything, or on the phone. I promise. I'm sorry, I gotta go." He leaned into her ear. "Love you." As they drove away, Cindy felt like the most miserable person ever. She put the calendar on the table and then crossed out today. The countdown of waiting went on. 3 weeks later, she realized something was wrong with her. Only what? The hunch came suddenly. It couldn't be. She was walking out of the clinic this morning, walking and smiling like a complete idiot. The doctor said she was pregnant. The term is very small, so when she asked who was there, he laughed and said, "A baby." Nothing else is known yet. Robert's baby is in it, his and hers. It's so unexpected, so exciting. He'll be calling tonight. Cindy had no idea what his reaction would be. She was already approaching the gate when she felt someone looking at her. Cindy turned around and immediately met eyes with Liam. She felt the blood rushing in her head. He had found her, and here she was. She could definitely forget about being happy now. Liam smiled crookedly and quickly disappeared behind the bushes. Cindy walked into the house. She sat down on a chair in her clothes. She sat for a long time, then stood up resolutely and took out her suitcase. Strangely enough, she had a lot of stuff. She had to take a bag too. She thought and took half of the money that had been left for the household. Now she had to write something to Charles. He was the only one she trusted enough to talk to about everything. The letter turned out to be longer than she thought it would be. She explained everything about her and Robert, nothing about the pregnancy. She left the house, found Sebastian. "Sebastian, I'm leaving." "Where are you going?" "Yes, I'm going home." The man put away the shovel he was fixing. "Cindy, what happened?" "It's a long story, and I'd like to forget it." "Charles, I left a letter." "And Robert?" Cindy blushed. "What about Robert?" "Cindy, do you take everyone for an idiot? You can never hide what's been going on between you two." "I'll call him." "I don't know what you're thinking, but you're wrong. Sebastian, don't you understand? I'm not worthy of Robert. He'll forget me, marry a normal girl." "It's all wrong. He won't be happy with me anyway." Cindy hugged Sebastian, then headed for the gate. "Wait, can I at least give you a ride?" She waved. "No need, thanks. I'll do it myself." Her grandmother's house greeted her with a dank dampness. It had taken her 3 days to get here. She'd changed her route on purpose so no one could find her. Her passport had been registered where she had once lived with her parents, which was almost 150 miles away. Her grandmother took her when Cindy was very young. To be honest, she can barely remember everything, and what she does remember, she doesn't want to remember. No one in the village knew what had happened to her parents. No one would ever even try to ask her grandmother because she had a short answer for everyone. Those who didn't know would blink for a long time afterward, not understanding why they were being punished. Cindy walked around the house. "Well, Cindy, there you are, back where you hated it so much. It's all right. It's going to be all right, isn't it, my good girl?" Cindy stroked her belly. She was sure she was going to have a girl, a little sunshine, with Robert's eyes. Having melted the stove, Cindy made herself some tea and sat down at the table. Tomorrow she would devote the day to cleaning, and then she had to do something about work. It was a big village, so maybe she could find something. In the morning, Cindy cleaned up, threw away a lot of things, then saw a large dried-up rod under the door. She even smiled a little. Grandma, if Cindy did something wrong, they grabbed the rod right away. And it didn't matter at all how old she was, with what pleasure she broke it and threw it into the stove. A few days later, Cindy went to the so-called office. All village business used to be settled there. Time had passed, of course, but not so much. She wondered how long she had not been here. It was 5 years. On the one hand, it was a long time, but on the other hand, what was 5 years for a person? For an ordinary person, it was just a short period of time, but for Cindy, it was a lifetime. David, Cindy hardly remembered the name of the local boss, even waved his hands. What's the job? Those who have worked all their lives have nothing to pay, and you say work. Cindy was confused. What am I supposed to do? What do you do? The same thing everyone else does. Thank God they haven't canceled the buses yet. So everyone goes downtown to work. Cindy sighed. Well, I'll drive. She had to buy a new SIN card, the one she'd thrown away at the station. She found a job quickly. The salary was small, minus the road, not much at all, but it was better than nothing. Cindy hid the money she'd taken from Charles' house. Her daughter would have to buy everything. The girl checked in at the local clinic, had all the tests. "Oh, honey, I don't know what to tell you." The full-figured woman doctor, who was Cindy's doctor, was going through the papers on the table. The girl tensed up. "Something wrong with the baby?" "No, there's nothing wrong with the baby. It's you. No hemoglobin, bad blood, and a very narrow pelvis. Not only will you have to come in more often than other women, but you'll have to go to the hospital a week before delivery." "Is that serious?" "Well, how can I put it? For some people, these problems are not problems at all, but for others, they're dangerous. I don't want to scare you for nothing. I'll say this, we'll watch you and then we'll see. Does the child have a father?" Cindy smiled. "Well, what about without a daddy?" "Children without a daddy don't exist, but we don't have one and we won't have one." "I see. And another single mom. Well, go on, and we'll have another test in a week." Cindy was very worried at first, but then she calmed down. She feels great, so she's gonna be fine. She will give birth to Christina, she will love her, and they will have a real family. Cindy didn't know why. How could she be so sure it would be a daughter? She just knew, that's all. When it was time to give birth, it was March outside. There was still a lot of snow, but the sun was already cheerful. Cindy's back had been pulling since the morning. She doesn't go into the hospital until Monday, and today is still Saturday. Strange, maybe pregnant women have a reaction to the weather like old people. She decided to go out for a walk. Maybe she'd get some air and feel better. As soon as she stepped outside, a car stopped in front of the house. She froze. Her heart was pounding so hard she wanted to clutch it with her hand. Robert slowly stepped out of the car. He looked at her with a grim look that didn't bode well. "Well, hello there, fugitive." "Robert, how did you find me?" He wanted to answer something, but he finally saw her stomach. What is that?" "Robert, did you run away from me with my baby?" "Yes, Robert, I ran away from you with my baby." He walked towards her. His look did not bode well. The closer he got, the more his heart pounded, the more his lower back ached. He came, close, stopped. "Now you're going to have to answer all my questions." Cindy nodded and slowly began to settle down. The pain in her back intensified and began to develop throughout her body. "Cindy, Cindy." She heard Robert's voice as if from far away. The girl felt that she was being carried somewhere, taken somewhere, then scolded for something. Somewhere in the distance a child's cry, so thin it must be her girl. Cindy tried to open her eyes, but she fell somewhere completely. "Mommy, wake up." "Mommy? Whose name is that?" Cindy opened her eyes. An unfamiliar white room. Cindy tried to stroke her stomach, but it wasn't there. The remnants of sleep instantly faded away. Where? And she saw there was a nurse standing next to the bed. She had a small bundle in her arms, with only a small nose sticking out of it. "Here's your princess. She's so pretty, but she's hungry too. Let me help you." Cindy took her daughter and froze. How pretty she was. She really was a princess. She wanted to feed her, but she felt someone looking at her. Robert was standing in the doorway. Cindy remembered everything. What would happen now? Cindy. "Robert, I'll explain everything to you." She knew perfectly well that this time she could not explain anything to him, and perhaps she did not need to. Since Charles had not told him anything, perhaps she did not need to. Let it be her secret. Cindy looked at Robert with the eyes of a beaten dog. Tears sprang from her eyes. He rushed to her. "Don't cry, you can't cry. Everything's going to be all right. Everything's going to be all right now." Robert picked her up from the hospital. He made a mess with all the flowers and balloons. They'd never seen anything like it in the village. When they got home, Cindy saw not only the crib she'd bought from an ad, but lots of beautiful things for her daughter. In the evening, Robert took her hands in his. "Cindy, when will Christina be ready for the road?" Cindy was frightened. If she had a chance here, it would become quite small in the city. "Oh, Robert, she's just a baby. Maybe in a few months." "Months? But that's so long I have to work." A week later, Robert left and said he'd be back in 2 or 3 weeks. He couldn't come any sooner. "I've got to tell my dad. You know, he's walking now, but with a cane. He is. I'm so happy for him. You have no idea. He's gonna be so happy. I didn't tell them anything." He left and Cindy felt so sad. When Christina was a month old, they went to the clinic. It was possible, of course, to wait for the doctor at home, but she was so fed up with the unloved village that she could not tell. After the checkup, when Cindy decided to walk through the market, she suddenly stopped like a stumbling block. Cindy thought she saw Liam in the crowd. She took off her seat and with a quick step went to where the familiar face had flashed, but found no one else like him. The young woman exhaled. No, it couldn't be. Where would Liam come from? If only for her soul, but the address. And then Cindy remembered that she had once mentioned her town in conversation. If it was him, what did he want? Cindy walked through the market one more time. Christina was starting to get cranky, and the woman headed for the cab stand. Robert had left her enough money to get around comfortably. Before getting into the car, she looked around once more. No, she was definitely imagining things. Why had I come all the way out here? At home she fed and tucked Christina in and went out into the yard. It had been over 2 weeks since Robert had left. They'd called yesterday, and he'd said he'd be here today or tomorrow. Cindy couldn't make sense of herself. Was she happy? Yes, very. But what lay ahead? That she didn't know. Living and lying to Robert? He had said last time that as soon as Christina could be moved, they would get married right away. She would finally be his wife. Cindy decided to weed with the flowers, the only decoration in the yard. The door to the house was open, so if Christina woke up, she would hear right away. "Hello, Cindy." She flinched and turned around. Liam was standing in the yard. "What are you doing here?" "What do you want?" "How did you find me?" Liam smirked. "But it's not that hard. Let's go inside, darling. I missed you madly." Cindy stood up opposite him. "We're not going to any house. Leave me alone at last. Your debt is paid. What do you want from me anyway?" Liam grabbed her arm and dragged her into the house. Cindy tried to break free, but remained silent, afraid of scaring her daughter. Liam threw her on the couch, sat down himself across from her. "I have debts to pay, but I have debts to pay. And you can help me pay them off. You're crazy. I'll go to the police. Though, then I guess your Robert will find out about everything. You know Michael has lots of pictures of you and testimonials from satisfied customers too. Liam, leave me alone. What makes you think I have to pay your debts at all?" Liam laughed, stood up and headed towards the crib. Cindy quickly tore off the couch and stood between him and the crib. "I don't have any money. I'm telling you the truth." "You don't, but yours, Robert, very much does. It's not mine." "Cindy." Liam sighed. "You see, you're my last hope. I won't give up. I have nothing to lose, and if I don't have the money in a week, I'll tell your Robert everything. Don't wait a week. I'm listening to you." They turned around and Robert was standing on the doorstep. He motioned to Liam. He tried to jump out the door, but he didn't have time. Robert caught him and punched him in the face. "What are you doing here?" And why does Cindy have to give you the money? Lime tried to get away again, but immediately received another blow. Your Cindy is a call girl. She's been a call girl for a long time. Oh, you bastard. Robert punched Lime again, and Cindy quietly settled down on the couch. That was it. The phantom happiness was over before it had even begun. Tears streamed from her eyes. 10 minutes later, a car roared to life. Apparently Lime had left. Robert came back, sat down on a chair, and approached her. Is it true? Robert, I've been meaning to tell you everything, but I kept being afraid you wouldn't want to. You're right, I won't. You're crap. You're such an asshole. Am I gonna take my daughter away from you? Or maybe my daughter isn't mine either? And you just don't know who her daddy is. Cindy stood up, proudly raising her head. You'd better think she's not yours. It'll be easier on everyone. Robert stood up, gave her a long look, and walked out of the house, and Cindy collapsed on the couch and sobbed. It was 200 hours later when she went outside. There were big bags on the porch, diapers, clothes, cereal. She cried again. God, why is she like this? A few months passed. In the evening, Cindy was counting the money she had. The money that Robert had once given her had recently run out. She had been very frugal. She had bought nothing for herself, only the cheapest food. Now she would have to make do with her allowance, which she had been saving. The woman put the money aside. A month ago she had to buy a car of firewood. It hit her budget very hard, but she has a child in the house and no option to heat economically. For 3 months she will definitely have enough. But then what? She didn't know yet. There was a knock at the door. Cindy flinched. It was evening outside, raining. Who could it have brought to her? Cindy looked out the window. She couldn't see anything. Everything was flooded. The windows were fogged up. She felt creepy for some reason. She went to the door. Who's there? Cindy, open up. It's Charles. The woman quickly unhooked the door and threw herself on the neck of her past savior. Where did you come from? How? I'm here to meet my granddaughter. I barely got the address from Robert. What happened? Cindy sighed. What was bound to happen someday? Robert found out about everything. Well, what did he find out? Did you tell him what happened? No, I didn't have time. He's gone. Who cares what happened? It happened. So you're okay with it? Of course. I won't even try. I'll raise my daughter. She'll grow up a little. We'll move to the city. I'll put her in a kindergarten, and I'll get a job myself. The man looked at her carefully, then shook his head. Show me your granddaughter. Charles insisted that she go to the city with him. If you don't want to live in our house, I'll buy you an apartment. Why are you sitting here alone? A child should grow up in civilization. But Robert's not here. He's gone to his home country. Angry as hell. He doesn't talk to anyone and hardly calls me. But why do I bring everyone nothing but misery? Come on, don't beat yourself up. It's just the way life is, and there's nothing we can do about it. 3 days later they left. Charles, as promised, bought her a 2-room apartment nearby, and he visited her often. Christina loved her grandfather. Cindy was finally able to finish her studies and even get a job. The daughter was 4 years old when Charles caught a cold. At first it was just a cold, to which he paid no attention, and as it turned out, for nothing. The illness progressed, and within a week he was sick. Cindy and Christina moved in with him. Cindy had to take a vacation because he didn't want anyone else in the house. Charles, we have to eat. Cindy, but I don't want to really. Tell me, did Robert show up? No, of course not. What do you think? Cindy looked at him in surprise. What do I think? I don't understand you. Cindy, I'll be gone, and you'll be alone in the world again. Hasn't there been a good man by your side all this time? Cindy smiled. No, I haven't. I don't understand. Have you decided to marry me off? I have, and as soon as possible. I don't think I'm going to make it this time. What are you talking about? Don't you dare even think of such a thing. By evening, Charles was worse, and the doctor insisted on hospitalization. Cindy went with him, and with Christina remained faithful Sebastian, with whom the girl was also very friendly. Cindy sat in the corridor while the doctor examined Charles, then he came out to her. Why didn't you come sooner? The doctor was about 40, a very handsome man with a calm look. You don't know how hard it was to get Charles to go to the hospital. He wouldn't go now. He was just so sick he couldn't argue. My name is Jacob. Seeing the mute question in Cindy's eyes, he smiled. Just Jacob for you. Unfortunately, people like that are not uncommon. They're afraid to cause a lot of trouble, but they cause even more. Excuse me, can I buy you a coffee and we can talk? Yes, of course, I'd appreciate it. They were in the doctor's office. He made coffee, put the cup in front of Cindy. What can I say? Of course it's very bad, considering that Charles has had many operations in his life, and his body is very worn out. It's nothing critical. I mean, we'll fight. We'll get it out, but there may be complications, but it's too early to tell. Thank you. I'm very worried. This man is very important to us. To us? Are you married? The doctor seemed upset, but Cindy smiled. No, we are me and my daughter. You have a daughter? Yes, Christina. She's about to be 5. She's probably as beautiful as you are, isn't she? Cindy was embarrassed. Not at all, much better than me. Jacob laughed. You're a real mother. Only with real mothers, their child is unequivocally better. They talked for another half hour. Cindy was so at ease, and Jacob suddenly said, Cindy, I don't even know how to say this properly. In general, I would like to invite you, for example, to a restaurant or maybe somewhere where your girl would be interested too. She smiled. A nice man, of course, older than she was, but that was such a small thing. Maybe Charles is right. Stop waiting for Robert, who doesn't care about them. I'll think about it, only if later, when Charles is feeling better. No problem, I'll wait. Besides, I have an incentive now to get him back on his feet as soon as possible. They said goodbye warmly. Tell me, what time can I come tomorrow? Right after lunch, with a lot of tests and procedures before lunch. Okay, thank you very much. She left and Jacob stood pensive for a long time. The family must be very wealthy. I wonder who she is to this Charles. A daughter? Doesn't seem like it, but they must have something in common, so it makes sense. The thing is, Jacob always wanted the good life. He was a good doctor, though, and he loved his job. He didn't want to lead anyone astray. He just thought that if he was to connect his life with someone, it should be with someone who would be of some use besides love. Cindy seemed to be just the person he needed. He would have to get her interested, but in the meantime he would treat the man she had come with. After a few days, Charles got better, so much so that he asked Cindy to bring him some cutlets. Cindy looked at him in surprise. Cutlets? That's right. I don't know why I wanted cutlets so badly. Jacob, who was also in the room, laughed. Well, now I see it's on the mend. So, Cindy, you must keep your promise. He left the room and Charles looked at Cindy. What promise, if it's no secret? Cindy waved it away. Jacob asked me to go to a restaurant, and I said I'd think about it when you were better. Charles hesitated. Why, that wouldn't be such a bad idea. There was something about the doctor he didn't like, and he couldn't say what it was, but he was a grown man, an established man, not a bad match for Cindy. But there was an unpleasant feeling in his soul. And Cindy and Jacob were really developing a romance. Cindy couldn't say she liked the doctor very much as a man, but he wasn't disgusting either. He was smart, very versatile, and he was good with Christina. Charles had already checked out when Cindy came to see him. She and Jacob had been dating for a month and a half, and today he proposed to her. Cindy was confused. She didn't think it would be that quick. Charles immediately saw that Cindy was worried about something. "Cindy, what's wrong and why are you alone?" "I came to talk. Jacob proposed to me." Charles felt a twinge in his heart. "I said I'd think about it. A month and a half is not a long time." "Cindy, how do you feel about him?" "How do you feel about him?" "I don't know. He doesn't disgust me, he's interesting." Cindy grinned. "Of course it's nothing like it is with Robert." Charles looked at her carefully. "Are you still in love with Robert?" She looked at him in surprise. Why is it possible to fall out of love with someone? There was silence for a few minutes. Then Charles said, "Yes, Cindy, you have to weigh everything. Loving one person and living with another is very hard." She left and Charles picked up the phone. He didn't want to interfere in the relationship between Robert and Cindy, especially since the latter didn't want to hear anything about her. But now he decided that he would try. Robert hung up the phone. He had immediately interrupted his father when he talked about Cindy. But the fact that she had been proposed to and would probably accept it left a residue on his soul. He took the picture from the table, and no one here knew anything about her. So the little portrait of Cindy always stood on his desk, and also Christina's. His father, though Robert had never asked for it, sent pictures of her from time to time. Robert knew Dad had bought her an apartment, knew he was helping his granddaughter, so he sent him money. He didn't say it was for Christina, but Charles understood it all himself. The older Christina got, the more she looked like Robert. He saw it perfectly well. He looked at her pictures for a long time, but he couldn't help it. There was a very strong resentment against his father. Why hadn't he told him right away? Shit. He got up from the table and walked over to the window. He stared out at the street for a while, then pulled out his cell phone. "Dad, can you tell me how and what? Why did Cindy do it?" "Of course I'll tell you everything. I should have done it a long time ago, but you didn't want to hear it." They talked for over an hour. When Robert hung up the phone, he felt worse. Shit, so what? Did it get better? No, definitely not, because he now realized that he behaved, to put it mildly, in a bad way. Cindy, it was her fault too. She should have told him everything at once too. Would he have been with her then? Probably not. But then there wouldn't have been all this. There wouldn't have been Christina. There wouldn't have been those very happy days. All in all, Robert was completely confused, so he knew he had to go home, look Cindy in the eye, and then decide what to do. Some nasty inner voice squeaked, "Who needs you after all these years? Cindy's doing the right thing. She would get married and live a normal life, not wait for the weather." Robert tried to muffle that voice, opened the door, asked the secretary to come in. "Emma, I have to go to America. Any questions are for the deputy. I'm to be called as a last resort." "Okay, I'm sorry. Is there a problem with your father?" "No, he's fine. Thank you." He noticed a shadow on the secretary's face, and suddenly he remembered that this nice woman had been very concerned about his father's health when he was here for surgery, had even visited him in the hospital a few times, and then they had left. Robert vividly remembered how glum his father had been the day he'd left, But Robert had attributed his mood to the fact that Sebastian had reported Cindy's disappearance. What if that wasn't the case at all? Could it be that Father and Emma? Damn, but why can't he ever see beyond his own nose? Cindy and Jacob sat in the cafe. She has to give an answer tonight. Cindy has been up all night, she kept thinking. Jacob is good, reliable. What more could a woman want? Everything seems fine, but Jacob, I realize you're waiting for an answer. Cindy, why don't we have dinner first? She smiled. Christina was at Charles, and it was safe to rest. Cindy knew that Charles would tuck the girl in, read her a story, and they would probably watch cartoons on TV while her mom was away. Cindy forbade watching cartoons before bedtime, but the grandfather spoiled his granddaughter. They ate dinner, and Cindy realized the hour had come. Jacob, I'm going to be honest with you. I've given your proposal a lot of thought, and I can tell you now, I couldn't marry you. I have been in love with another man for many years, and I would hate to lie to you. Jacob sighed. You know, I expected that answer. It was clear to me that when we're together, you're not really with me. So you're not resentful. Cindy was glad. She didn't want to offend Jacob. I'm offended, but not offended enough not to suggest that you stay friends. While the flight lasted, Robert thought about his life. At the time when he met Cindy, he had a girlfriend, and admittedly, he was even going to get married, but not until he met Cindy. It was only then that he realized what true love meant. The parting was hard. The girl was the daughter of his boss. What does he have in the end? Nothing. After he left Cindy, he couldn't think of any other relationship. He'd had women, of course, but they were just for one day. He took a cab and went home. He wondered if Cindy was at her father's, how would their meeting happen? There was no Cindy, but there was his father who said glumly, "You must be late. They're at the restaurant, and Cindy will give him an answer tonight." How? Right. What did you want? He's a decent man, not the wind in the field like some people. Daddy? Daddy what? Cindy should have gotten married a long time ago, and she's been waiting for you, you fool. What restaurant are they at? The Wave, I think. Where are you going? I'm going that way. I won't let her say yes. Cindy and Jacob went outside. Do you need a ride? No, I don't need a ride. I'll walk. Cindy, it's late, but the weather's nice. Cindy. A shout literally tore through the evening air. They turned and saw Robert running towards them. Cindy felt her legs go cotton. Jacob looked at her pale face in surprise. Is that him? Yes. Robert ran up angrily, looked at Jacob, then shifted his gaze to Cindy. Cindy, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm an idiot. I'll be sure to beg your forgiveness. But now you must tell this man that you will not marry him, because otherwise I will not vouch for myself. Jacob's eyebrows flew upward, but he found the strength to laugh. Calm down, young man. Cindy has already turned me down, apparently because of you. 2 months later, Robert finally moved back home. He was going to start his own business, but now he had other things to worry about. Dad, are you okay? Charles laughed. I'm fine. You look like an opera singer. Dad, it's not funny. I don't know why Cindy likes tuxedos so much. Why don't you change? Charles waved me off. I've got time. It's 2 hours till the signing. I'd hurry up if I were you. We're going to have a guest any minute. A man has kindly agreed to fly to our wedding, or rather, a guest. What's it got to do with me? They're your guests. Not exactly. My assistant Emma's coming to my wedding. Remember her? Was it his imagination, or did his father turn pale? The doorbell rang and Charles almost ran into the room. appeared in front of Robert and Emma 20 minutes later in full parade. The wedding ceremony was being held in the best restaurant in town. When Robert saw Cindy walking toward him and leading the little princess by the hand, his breath caught. How good his girls are! They are the most beautiful. How happy is he that Cindy has found the strength to forgive him. And Christina is the most wonderful child in the world. They walked over. Robert kissed his bride tenderly, and Christina was picked up in his arms. Cindy looked around as if searching for someone. Robert, where's Charles? If he's not here, there's no ceremony. You know what he means to us. He knew. Gently he turned Cindy around and pointed somewhere. There in a corner sat Charles and Emma. They were chatting, and Emma's hands were resting in Charles. It seemed like they were alone here, and there wasn't a crowd of dressed-up guests. Cindy smiled. Isn't that Emma by any chance? Emma, how do you know? He called out for her when he was delirious with fever, but he wouldn't tell me who it was. Charles and Emma even had to be called so the ceremony could begin. It's been a year. Cindy, you coming soon? Yes, Robert. The trial's over. I'll be there soon. How did it go? It was great. Michael and Liam got a good settlement. I'll tell you all about it when I get there. By the way, I have more news for you. Robert smiled. Cindy spent a year trying to find the girls who had worked for Michael out of choice. There were a lot of girls. Liam often figured in their path too. By all means, she decided to punish them. Robert helped in any way he could. Today was the last trial. He lit the candles on the table, looked around the room. By the glass in the hall stood a small box, and in it, of marvelous beauty, a bracelet. Cindy was preparing a surprise for him. Only he already knew what that surprise was and had thoroughly prepared for it. This morning, he happened to see the test in the bathroom, and it had a clear 2 stripes on it. The door slammed open and Cindy appeared on the kitchen doorstep. She gave the table a surprised look, then looked at Robert. Are we having some kind of celebration? She looked at her husband suspiciously, trying to remember what she might have forgotten. Of course, I hope you'll give me a son this time. Cindy sighed frustratedly. You know everything, don't you? He picked her up in his arms, and I know everything, everything, everything. And I also know that I love you very much, more than life. The woman laughed, hugged her husband. You don't know everything. Robert looked at her anxiously. Tell me? We're going to have twins. He gently set Cindy on the floor and exhaled completely dumbfounded. Really? That's it. Cindy laughed and hugged her husband gently.